What is going on, Rotogrinders? Dean here at Dean7904. If you want to get all technical on me, that is the name around the DFS industry. It is 10:10 on the East Coast, 7:10 on the West Coast, 9:10 Tennessee time. Of course, it means time for the flagship show here at Rotogrinders. It's called Grinderslive. Joining me today, kicking off 3 hours. I'm rounding up 3 hours of coverage as far as NFL DFS, taking you guys all the way up the lock. It's Chris Prince. You guys know him from the six pack. You know him for being a former FanDuel champion. You also know him best for being Beer Makers fan. Beer, what's going on? How are things in your world? How are we doing this Sunday morning?
Things are good, buddy. We talked pre-show, and the first snow of the year has arrived. So it's kind of the changing of the guard. So winter is here. Put everything away yesterday. Start packing in and stay inside for about 6 months. So that's life in the north. We don't get that nice weather like you guys got down south.
I hear winter is coming. I hear the north. All I'm thinking is Game of Thrones in my head. I'm going to stack Sansa today with the Taysom Hill. I'm not sure if you've heard this yet, Beer. Taysom Hill. He's a quarterback. But get this. This is wild. He's a quarterback, but one of the sites, FanDuel, has him listed as a don't tell anybody. Anybody watching, just don't tell your friends. Just keep this between us. Have you heard this or no? You know what this?
I actually have a buddy who just dabbles. He barely plays, and he thought he was a genius. He calls me up and says, "Hey, they have Taysom Hill listed as a tight end. I can play 2 quarterbacks on FanDuel." Like, man, you are a genius. So, I mean, we don't need to kill a dead horse. We might as well just get the Taysom talk going, get it done with, and move on to the rest of the slate. Because I'm sure everybody on every show you've heard before this, after this, have all talked plenty of Taysom Hill.
Yeah, and as far look, we're here for the first hour. They're going to be talking about the lineup HQ and showing off lineup HQ tools. After us, it's going to be Tambo and Blender. I don't know if Blender's going to be bringing us receipts today. He's been fun today on Twitter. I'm not sure if you caught that, but that's good times for sure. Maybe he'll dab into that. Probably not. And then closing us out, leading up the lock, is Roth, Christie, and Tuttle taking all your questions there on crunch time. We'll do our best to see if we can knock out some questions. It's an intimate show. It's just a 2-man booth, so maybe we don't yap as much, and we can save some time for some questions. What up, YouTube? Like, subscribe. We do appreciate that. It helps keeps the proverbial lights on, however you want to, whatever phrase you want to use. Yeah, sure, why not? Beer, this slate, it's kind of a throwback slate, right? Where there's no game total over 51, last I checked, 50, 51, give or take. So we're not saying 57, 58. Some of the best quarterback options are off the board. Mahomes is on the Yahoo slate, but it's not on most of the main slates. Seattle and Arizona already played, so no Russ and no Kyler. And we're missing another one of the great quarterbacks that I'm forgetting for some reason in my head. But no Allen, no Josh Allen. So that kind of leads us into the quarterback conversation. Or if you want to get like big picture, what is your big picture as far as a slate? Because for me, it's, especially with the value that's out there we're going to talk about, you can basically play whoever you want and pay up wherever you want and even overspend in some spots. But at the same time, there's a few plays I really like. Dalvin Cook, obviously, just like everybody else. And then otherwise, it's just like a bunch of plays that are fine. They're good. They're not great. They're not spectacular. I don't love the lineups I'm pumping out today. like Calen, Blage, and David Johnson, or Duke Johnson, Myers, all your chalk, cash game players. These aren't names we're excited about necessarily. But is that your general thought as far as a slate, or is it different?
No, I agree. I don't think outside of Taysom Hill, Dalvin Cook, obviously those guys are going to be super owned, and we'll definitely hit on it. And what I think you should do, obviously you're going to have an opinion on that, but I think there's a lot of spots to go. I don't think there's one game that stands out as the game to stack. Like you said, we don't have that 57, 58 point total. We're missing a lot of not only marquee quarterbacks, we're missing a lot of the running backs, the high-end tight ends, which is helping Taysom's case on FanDuel. So a lot of games that I think you can pull a few pieces from, but all in all, as far as different choices, different ways to build lineups, different ways to go, I think this is a fun slate. There's so many different ways you can go, stances that you can take on some of these higher owned guys, and there are some pivot plays. There's value. So yeah, gross. I never thought I'd utter the name Kalen Blage and be excited about it, but here we are. That's one of the guys we're talking about. So I'm looking forward to this one. I do think there's a lot of ways to attack it. I do think there's some game theory involved as well. Should be a fun one here.
I believe you made your 6-pack, if I'm not mistaken, Blage. Did he not?
He did. Again, it was kind of shocking. I thought I was done. I thought I moved past Kalen Blage. I've had a lot of disparaging things to say about him over the years. But you get away from Adam Gase, and look what happened. So
and who's he playing today?
he is playing Adam Gase. Now that didn't work out for me with the Le'Veon Bell revenge, so I'm still a little stung by that one. But the point is, the dude's going to get the ball a lot. They want to get him the ball more. We'll see if that's just coach speak. Matchup is good, so.
Difference Taysom Hill, of course, on FanDuel, where he's a tight end. Like, you play him in your cash games, and I think you just play him in every lineup and whatever, just because the opportunity cost is terrible. I guess we'll touch on that as far as tight end, and I think it's what most people are going to do. He's going to have an absolutely ridiculous number, 4.5K. But on DK, where he is cheap, 4.8K, like, he's not a great passer. Like, he passed a good bit in college, I believe, at BYU. I feel like he played like 5 or 6 years there. Because he had multiple leg injuries, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was there a while, for sure.
Yeah, he kept getting exemptions to come back, but I think he was there for a good bit. And, 5.8K, obviously at home in the Dome. He's got some guys that actually throw the ball to, but I feel like I saw his prop was at 160 yards. And the other thing is we're not officially certain, like, it's all beat writers and everybody, all the tea leaves, whatever you want to say, is like he's the guy that's going to start. And Sean Payton certainly loves him. Find yourself someone that loves you the way Sean Payton loves himself, some Taysom Hill. There's also financial implications, it seems like, contractually, but they don't want Winston to play necessarily. He would get a bonus possibly. And they are married to Hill for at least, I think, next year as well, too. They gave him like, 25, 30 million or something like that. Give me like the worst case scenario, the best case scenario. What are you anticipating as far as Taysom Hill on DK? Because right now, he makes a lot of sense, too, in your cash games, just because he's 4.8K. And, all of a sudden, now that pivots to, if you want to get Adams, if you want to get Cook, it's really, really easy to do that.
All right, I'll just kind of cover my viewpoint on Taysom Hill. I know everyone has an opinion here, but I think FanDuel, you just have to play him. I look at the tight end landscape, and is there even, let's say he has a bad game. And what's a bad game at quarterback? 10, 12 points. We may not even get a tight end that gets 12 points. So,
yeah.
You look at the rest of the field. If we had a Kelsey, a Kittle, a guy with a ceiling, and we don't have Ertz, I mean, Andrews is really the only guy that could threaten anything, even in a bad game for Taysom Hill. So I just don't see the advantage of not playing him there. I get he's going to be 75, 80% owned, which we have him at right now. But over there, I just think you play him and you move on. I just don't see a way that unless there's a tight end that comes out and scores 30, which how often do we get that? I mean, if we looked up the top 10 tight end scores for the year, they're probably terrible. On DraftKings,
it's Kittle and Kelsey, and now they're available in the main slate.
Right. That's my point. So unless there's a guy that can dramatically outproduce what he's going to give you, even in a down game, I'm looking at the basement bottom floor of what this guy could give you. Now, there's always injury. There's always Winston could come in and ruin everything. But, I mean, you got to think he's going to give you at least 9-10 points at a minimum. So, FanDuel, that's easy. I'm not going to get cute with that one, even at that ownership. DraftKings, now there, I'm perfectly fine fading him because you look at the difference. If you bomb at quarterback, you're in trouble. I could bomb at tight end. If there's no other tight end on FanDuel that really crushes it, it's not killing my lineups. I'm still very much live. Now, if I get killed at quarterback and there's a guy that goes out and gets 35, 40 points, I'm just that much further behind the field. So a 20, 22, 23% owned quarterback on DraftKings, now we're talking about I don't need to play that. Cash games, sure, it opens some things up. Tournaments, I can go a lot of different directions. There's definitely some quarterbacks that ownership are going to fall on because everyone's going to want to play Taysom at 4.8.
Yeah, right now, I mean, I made 2 different cash lineups. One has him with Hill. One has actually Burrow, who isn't that much more. The matchup's not great, but he's going to drop back and chuck the ball 40 times. I'll take my chances. And I think there's some stability there, and there is a chance that Hill they have to come back. Like, they put Winston in. Winston, the better thrower, presumably. So there are some things that can go funky, but even if Winston's the quarterback, Hill is going to be involved in some way on the field sometimes. So I'm pulling up the ownership, massive ownership on DK from a quarterback perspective, 21.3%. We consider that 4.8K as far as the asking price. And then it's like what you normally see, a bunch of guys around 10% or so. Watson versus Houston. Burrow is at 8.7% at 5.5K. Herbert has just been absolutely phenomenal. He has a fresh cut. He's facing those Jets. Lamar Jackson, I'm told he was really good last year. I remember him being a phenom when it comes to racking up fantasy points. Maybe this is the week, and I'm probably playing him in my cash games on FanDuel because I just keep playing Lamar Jackson, and he's a better play over there too. No 300-yard bonus. He's probably not going to get a 300-yard bonus. So, he's just a better option on FanDuel than he is as far as DK, as far as the scoring system. And then, Cam is super cheap, but, will he ever throw a touchdown? Does he have to if he keeps running him in? But, in theory, he has to throw one at some point, right? He's due. That Watson versus Cam game, let's start there. What's your take on those quarterbacks?
I'm not as high and optimistic. A lot of people are looking at that game and on that game, and I get it. You got two athletic quarterbacks, guys that run. I just talked about the ownership being driven down by everyone wanting to play Taysom Hill. So, it would make sense to go to that game. I think there's other spots that are going to be even lower owned, more ignored than that game. I could just see that game get ugly. I know the total is up there. There's a lot of great pieces in that game, more so on the Houston side. New England, the issue is who do you stack them with? Every pairing's going to have Cam with Jacoby Myers. It's going to be super chalky. You don't really have to stack Cam with anybody, I guess, is appeal there. But I'm just kind of meh on that game, if that makes sense. I just think there's other spots that personally I want to attack. But both guys obviously make sense with their running ability. I just think there's some better options out there this week.
Yeah, I mean, Myers seems like he's too cheap on both sites. On Yahoo, where he's most expensive, that's kind of where I'm avoiding him. But I like him on DK, where he's 4.9. I like him on FanDuel, where he's 6K. Brandon Cook seems like he's too cheap as well for Houston. Duke Johnson. I mean, I know that Watson just doesn't throw the ball to the running back, which is kind of annoying. My big concern, I assume that New England, we don't know actives and inactives until 11:30, but I assume they're going to be rolling out 4 running backs.
Right.
Like, Belichick's a smart guy, and you think he's like, let's just have like a 13-play drive and run the ball every time and just destroy that clock. And like having Watson and having Duke and having Cooks just sitting on the bench for like 2/3 of a quarter. And like a 15-play like field goal drive for New England is like, that's my nightmare, because I feel like they can just bust off 5, 6, 4, just keep getting, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 1, first down. And maybe I'm overthinking it, but like, I assume that's what New England's going to do, right? They're just going to just run it down their throats.
I would think, why not? I mean, we'll see if Sony Michel's back, even if not. They've given Damian Harris the ball 20+ times. We've seen Rex Burkhead be a thing. So that's kind of my worry. I said that game could get ugly. Then you're not hitting the ceilings on these guys. Again, they're in great matchups. They both have that ceiling. But if this turns into that kind of game, which I could certainly see happening, definitely in the realm of possibilities, well, now we're not getting the 25, 30 points that we need from our quarterbacks. While there's other guys that are maybe hitting their ceilings. You mentioned Lamar. I think this is a spot where we finally get some vintage Lamar. I mean, a matchup with Tennessee, everybody's gone nuts against this defense. You got no Clowney this week. That certainly helped. So he's in play. On the cheaper end, if you don't want to play Taysom, I think Joe Burrow's your guy. I mean, he's only $700 more. We know they're going to throw a ton. This Washington defense better against the run than they are the pass. Some easy stacking partners there. Some great running back options on the Washington side. So those are more guys that I'm after. We mentioned Herbert. I saw Dan in the chat. That is a terrible haircut. I mean, that looks like the haircut your mom gives you, like in 4th grade. Drop the bowl on your head. We're gonna save a few bucks here.
I got that picture, by the way. I will drop that picture if it is available for the record.
I mean, just to cut off those locks. I mean, I like him today, but I'm a little worried about that. He can lose some of the mojo with that haircut, but I do like him against the Jets. Anybody against the Jets are in play. And then I'm going to add Big Ben Roethlisberger here. I mean, multiple touchdowns in 7 of 8 games. You talk about stacking partners, but you use any of the 3 of those guys. All big ceilings. They're all getting double-digit targets every week. This is a team that loves to throw the ball. So those are the guys that I'm really focused on. Lamar, Burrow as a cheap option, and then Ben Roethlisberger and Justin Herbert kind of in the middle range of those 2.
Yeah, I would sort of throw all those quarterbacks in the same bucket, and throw Kirk Cousins into the conversation as well. So because they're 3 quarterbacks that are well positioned with great matchups that are big favorites. Cousins versus the Cowboys. You got Herbert versus the Jets, and then you have Big Ben versus Jacksonville. And there's always that sort of like, this matchup is great. Oh, this matchup is too good because the other team can't even keep up, and they're not going to be throwing the ball in the second half. But hey, maybe you can get 3 or 4 touchdowns in the first half. So if you could, what are your thoughts on that? Because again, Cousins, in theory, if Minnesota had their druthers, might throw the ball 15 times.
I think it's, if you're looking to get away from Dalvin Cook, I think that's one of the ways that you can do it. I have a hard time with that personally. He should smash today, but 40% on running back, a lot of things can go wrong. We've seen him get hurt. We've seen him have to leave games. So I don't pick plays based on a guy that may get hurt. The point is, if you go to the other side, you go with some of the passing game, either attack could work here against Dallas. Now you need Dallas to put up some points, I think, is the concern here. Dalton back certainly helps, but let's not pretend Andy Dalton's been a world beater. I mean, I like Amari Cooper's price on DraftKings. I think he's cheap. I think it is an attractive game where everybody's just focused on Cook. there are other options here. We've seen Jefferson do well. We know Thielen has a big ceiling in him. So I don't mind that. I would rather just grab a receiver. I don't know that Cousins has the upside of some of these other guys that we've talked about. Maybe you grab a Thielen or a Jefferson to get off some of that ownership, but these guys are going to have ownership too. So we know our audience is getting smarter, but it is a way to kind of get some exposure to that Dallas defense mainly, but do it through one of the wide receivers and maybe they grab a couple touchdowns.
Yeah, I like Cooper as a run back in that Minnesota game. And I think, obviously it's a really, really strong pivot, leverage plays the kids call if you like. And they have ready-made receivers as far as Minnesota. We'll talk about them if you want to get away from Dalvin. Of course, like the running back position's not very deep today, but you can absolutely find some pivots, and we'll talk about them in a second. That's a good segue, I suppose. You got anything else as far as quarterbacks, or shall we talk about some running backs?
Those are the main guys that I'm playing. So a pretty limited treat for me today. Again, I have no issues with a Taysom fade on DraftKings, FanDuel. You just play him, and then there are other options here. So Lamar, Burrow, and Roethlisberger, and Herbert, my guys I'm using this week.
Do want to mention to the people, Monkey Knife Fight, if you guys want to check that out. There's a promo going on here at Rotogrinders. You get 3 months of free RG Premium with your first deposit and a $100 deposit bonus up to $50 back if you use the promo code Grinders. That's GRINDERS. I picked out a couple that I like. I assume Devin's going to throw them up on the screen right now. Oh, boy, this is a terrible
Man, I can't escape Calen Blage. Here he is again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the one you might – you're going to like that one. I think the number is just a little bit too low at 13.5 fantasy points. Take the over on that. I'm not sure if the other one is up on the screen just yet. I'm taking a peek at it right. Yeah. So Marquise Brown, like I said, I'm a glutton for Lamar. I'm a glutton for Marquise Brown for Hollywood. 10.5 fantasy points. I think this is the day he gets behind the defense and bust off a long one. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, but yeah, that's kind of sort of where I'm at. Do you have a thought on either of those? I guess besides Blage, of course. What are your thoughts as far as Hollywood? Does he get more than 10.5 fantasy points? Please say yes.
I mean, if you can't do it against the Titans, we gotta cancel the Hollywood show here. It's just been frustrating, and I know a lot of people continue to play him. Season-long audience. I know he's one of those guys you have to play, but daily we keep trying to make it work, Dean. I'm with you. Lamar, Andrews has popped here and there, but Brown's really given us nothing. But this is part of the reason I like this team. This matchup is just so good. Tennessee's defense has been absolutely atrocious. So all it takes is one. That's the beauty of a player like Brown, where that is a pretty decent number. If it's closer to that Blage number, I'm a little nervous. But a 50-yard bomb, you're there. You already made value. So certainly an upside play, and I don't mind that number at all. I like the Blage one a little bit more, but I don't hate the Brown one. And let me say, Monkey Knife had a lot of fun. I know the name's kind of crazy, and you're like, what the hell does that mean? But I mean, if you like props, if you like a different way to play DFS, that's certainly something you want to go check out.
I haven't had a chance to play just yet because I was in a state where it was not all good to go. But I've been jumping around, and I got to maybe it's good to go. I see Dan Bach in the chat. Dan, is Florida Monkey Knife Fight approved? Let me know because I'll jump on there and play. I'll use that promo code too with the deposit bonus. How about that? All right, pivot to running back. Cook. We referenced him pretty clear cut as far as the absolute top play from an ownership perspective because we have the salary because there's a lot of value going on this week. I'm looking at the fantasy point projection. He's projected to score. Again, these are projections, obviously, but he's projected to score. Let me see my UCF math here. About 7 more fantasy points than the next running back up on DK. And, of course, the ownership reflects it as well, too. 42%. What are you doing on Cook? Obviously, you get him in your cash games. What are you doing as far as tournaments?
I'm still going to have a healthy dose in tournaments as well. I'm going to be over the field on that number. It's just a really good spot. And, again, there are certainly things that could go wrong. But, I mean, we know that they want to get this guy the ball. He's basically functioning at an RB1 Christian McCaffrey type level here. And the price hasn't reflected that. FanDuel's got him up to 10K, but we know how easy it is to build lineups on FanDuel. You can get anybody you want. So even at 9K on DraftKings, I'm having a hard time fading him. Now, if you're locking in Taysom Hill, you're locking in Dalvin Cook, well, you better get different in some other spots because that's going to be a popular way to start, especially on FanDuel. You're going to eat up some of that cost of Dalvin Cook by plugging in Taysom Hill. So not saying you can't go that route, but you better get really, really creative with some of your stacks and some of your other spots that you're going with there. So I like him, Dean. I'm having a hard – I can't fade Dalvin Cook in this spot. If things go wrong, so be it, but – it's about the best spot you could, if we could create a spot here, give me Dalvin Cook at home against this Cowboys defense. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely made some lineups with like Jefferson or, with Thielen and just no Cook and just kind of hoping, touchdown variance goes in my direction. But I think his prop was over 100 yards as far as, running today. And I wouldn't feel comfortable wagering on the under. And this is kind of what I was talking about before as far as you look at your lineups and like, it's hard to just love these lineups because, okay, here's the next slew of running backs as far as ownership. The aforementioned Kalen Blage in a really strong spot there against the Jets, home favorite. And, he seems to be in the coach's good graces, good coach speak. And we're expecting about 20 touches here against the Jets at a really solid price. And Duke Johnson, really cheap. I guess we can throw out last week because the weather was just so goofy. Antonio Gibson versus Cincinnati. Then, oh boy. And I see people in the chat. I've seen people asking about chat. What's up? What's up, YouTube? Like, subscribe. We do appreciate that. We'll do our best to knock out some questions before we step aside. If we don't do so, we will be relieved eventually. In the middle, they'll talk. It's going to be Tambo and Blender, and after that, Crunch Time, Roth, and Kirsty and Tuttle will answer all your questions all at the lock. So they're asking about Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson, and I willfully put Adrian Peterson in some lineups today. Stone minimum at 4K. Is okay. Talk about this chunk of next running backs we have to pick from. I don't know if Beer's still with me or is he on mute? I am all by myself. There you go. Yeah, so I will answer my own question. And I'm playing some Adrian Peterson. Of course, we know Swift's not going to give it a go this week. Nice matchup here against Carolina. Kerryon Johnson, he was drafted 42nd overall or something like that. I think they just determined pretty quickly he's just not it. Beer, are you back with me? Beer, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I don't know what happened there.
I was given the draft history of Kerryon Johnson for no particular reason. But, yeah, I mean, look, I would want to leave the show, too, if you have to talk about Adrian Peterson. But I'm putting
I just had to duck out real quick. Nobody wants to talk AP. That one I'm having a hard time with. I mean, who knows what they're going to do? Yeah, he's the starter in name, but you got to think they're going to mix in some Kerryon Johnson as well. So I know it's a good matchup. I actually prefer the other side. I don't understand why Mike Davis isn't getting more love. And I know we haven't seen, the elite numbers he was putting up earlier in the season. But again, if we could tailor make a matchup for a guy, like give me a running back against the Lions. I mean, they've been the worst team against that position. So I get Curtis Samuel's been kind of stealing some work there, but I'm more on the Davis side than I am here on the AP or Kerryon trying to figure that out. We know Detroit is going to use multiple backs. I know they've gone to Swift, and he seemed like the guy, but I can't see them just giving Adrian Peterson 25 carries in this game. So good price, no doubt, good matchup. Just not a guy I'm excited to play this week.
I mean, they also have Jonathan Williams, too, who might work his way in. He's not going to get a lot of run. You don't roster him, but whatever he's getting, he's siphoning from potentially Peterson or Kerryon. Talk about Mike Davis he's been rough the last few times. Last week he was dealing with, I think it was a thumb. He did come back with a thumb, and hopefully he can catch the ball because that's important for him. Hopefully his thumb is fine. And Rodney Smith came in and got some run. I think even Trenton Cannon got a few carries, like you said. Curtis Samuel, not a ton of run, but 10 carries or so the last month, give or take, whatever it is. It's taken away from Mike Davis, who once upon a time we thought it was CMC light, basically getting every single carry. But yeah, you're right. Where are people at on Mike Davis? Is he going to be super low owned? What do we have? 12%? Is that about right to you?
Yeah, it kind of surprised me. Like I said, the spot is good, and I think that the issue is, again, the recency bias. I kind of talked about this in the video. It's a combination of the recency bias and the injury. I think is like you said, is he going to be able to catch the ball? It's a big part of what he does in this offense. But I mean, I just see the matchup, and I want all the Mike Davis I can get. So I don't even hate the pairing. And I know the Panthers defense is terrible, but Stafford dealing with injuries as well. No Galladay, no Swift. I mean, this is not a good offense. You're counting on AP, Marvin Jones, and TJ Hawkinson to lead the way. So a sneaky pairing of Davis and the Panthers defense is something I'm using a lot this week.
I have pieces of all three of those guys. I don't feel good about it.
That's fine. They're going to get the ball. I'm not saying they're bad plays. The point is the offense overall is not great. So, a lower owned D kind of off the radar. I know we're not talking defenses here, but the point is Davis is in a great spot. I'm not as worried about that injury. I think he's going to be fine here in a great matchup.
Yeah, and like Detroit, like you said, if their receivers are banged up, their quarterbacks are banged up, maybe if they want, they probably should just run the ball if they can and maybe we do see like 20 carries out of Peterson. That's sort of my thought process. But, I think he's going to get like 60, 65% of the action there. And that kind of like the inverse of that has been Antonio Gibson, and we're seeing popping at 14% ownership and more expensive. Nice matchup here against Cincinnati, but like he's allergic to third down. McKissick catches every 2-yard pass. I think he would be on the field more if they're winning, and they're probably, at least they're slight favorites here against Cincinnati. They're probably not going to be playing catch up. I don't get the Gibson love. I like Gibson, but I just can't play a guy that's going to be playing 35% of the snaps, like 40% of the snaps, maybe more.
Yeah, you're really counting on those touchdowns. I mean, that's what got him there last week, and he's definitely been a touchdown scorer, and this is not a matchup that's going to oppose him scoring touchdowns. I think McKissick is more of if this game turns into a shootout, which certainly could, and I really like this game. We brought up Burrow, and I think you go one of two game scripts. If you think Washington kind of slows it down, controls the game, then it's Gibson with Burrow and one or two of his pass catchers. If you think you're going to get a shootout here and maybe Cincinnati's playing from ahead, well, now I want the McLaurin, the McKissick side of that Washington side. So it's an interesting game where you can stack it up a lot of different ways, but I get the hesitation on Gibson. It's got to be the right game script. The guy that's not getting the ball a ton, like you said, is tough to trust. The touchdowns are what we're counting on here. I'm going to play some, but I have a mix of both of those guys here.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a whole slew of running backs that are all playable, but none of them are spectacular. Aaron Jones, not a great matchup, and he's another guy who's like not a workhorse, but he's got a workhorse price. Getting, he's on the field, I think 63% of the snaps last game, which is not ideal. Kamara probably going to be leaned on today. The asking price is pretty steep, but I think it's a really interesting pivot off of Cook. I think you can play both Kamara and Cook. That's not that hard to do if you want to do that. Just double down on the stud running backs. It's once again Giovanni Bernard's world there for Cincinnati. I guess there is who's it? P. Ryan that's kind of lurking to some degree.
Yeah.
Is that the guy's name? I get him and the Jets.
Yeah.
P. Ryan. And then James, what up with James Conner? We're supposed to, and I know we saw this a couple weeks ago with Dallas. Like, well, James Conner says they're going to grind this game down. And they were down 14-0 right away, and Conner never really got out of the gates, and he's just been bad for like multiple weeks now. What's the story here with James Conner? Can we trust him against Jacksonville? In theory, this is like the quote-unquote smash spot. Like, if you're going to get the volume, we don't know if he's going to get the volume. They're passing the ball efficiently these days. What happens here with Conner? Because this is another one I'm going to have some, but I don't feel confident about it.
I absolutely love Pittsburgh today, so they're going to be a big part of my builds. And it's more so the passing game, but lineups that I'm using, a Burrow or Herbert, I have no issues, and I'm using more James Conner than the field's going to use for sure. I got about 25% right now. I just think this is a spot where they need to get this guy going. We're undefeated, we're cruising right along, but we know playoff football, you're going to have to run the ball a little bit. Even a pass-first team, you're going to need to establish and get this guy going again. So I just think this is a spot they're going to be able to do whatever they want. Maybe they get out to a lead here. All right, let's get Conner going here, get him the ball some. So I like going with him. Again, pairing with the Pittsburgh defense makes sense. I know that's going to be a more popular defense, but the pairing of the two will not be overall. So, I like that spot for Conner. I prefer the passing game. That's definitely where I'm kind of putting my eggs in that basket, but I am mixing in some Conner in those lineups. I'm not using Ben or the receivers.
If our ownership is even close to accurate, I love Derrick Henry for tournaments at 3.8% on DK. Everybody sees Baltimore. It's a scary defense for sure. We know he ravaged this team last year in the playoffs. And the other thing that is kind of sort of somewhat hidden unless you kind of dig into it, they're without Calais Campbell, another one. They're two interior linemen for Baltimore. This can be a game when Henry gets 25 rushes and 3 catches or something like that. And it's not a steep running back pool. There's not a lot to necessarily love. There's a lot of stuff to like, and you can see the potential. But and also you can run it back with Lamar and Marquise and Andrews is kind of ready-made there too. I will have more than the field on Derrick Henry. Well, what's your thoughts on the King?
I'm not as optimistic as you are, but those injuries certainly help. That was news this morning that, a lot of casual players, they're not following Calais Campbell news and defensive line news. So I think more so in a stack, which will cost you some money, no doubt. You try to stack Henry, bring it back with Lamar and maybe an Andrews or a Brown. I think it makes more sense there. But you're right. A guy with that level of upside, they were going to get at a fraction of the ownership because of the matchup that looks scary. We've seen running backs do very well against this Baltimore team this season. So don't hate that at all. I think Kamara falls into that same boat. That can be leverage off of not only Cook, but Taysom Hill as well. I mean, everyone's going to be playing him on FanDuel. Are they going to pair the two? Yeah, you're going to get that in some lineups, the old double stack with Taysom. But Kamara makes a lot of sense here. Just think about Taysom. Is he going to attack down the field a ton? Maybe he does. We've seen him do that. But more often than not, it's going to be probably a lot of option stuff, a lot of checkdowns, getting the ball in Kamara's hands. So at 10% owned on an Alvin Kamara, I love that spot for him.
He can get 10 catches.
All right, there you go. You're already at 10 points even without any yards. So a matchup with Atlanta too. I know they've been much better defensively. They've been very good against running backs. I get all that, but this is one of those guys I don't really worry about matchup with an Alvin Kamara.
No. Miles Garrett is going to be out for Cleveland. Miles Sanders is really bad set of variance last week as far as touchdown variance. Every running back for Philly scored outside of Miles Sanders, but I think he's pretty interesting today, and a guy that's going to be basically ignored, looking at 8% as far as their projected ownership. And then James Robinson, who gets everything in the Jacksonville side. Bad matchup, obviously, but with Thompson out for the year, he's essentially the entire backfield, both running and receiving. An interesting bring back as far as Pittsburgh, if you think they can kind of sort of somewhat hang to some degree. Thoughts on those guys? Thoughts on anybody we've mentioned? Thoughts on anybody that we haven't mentioned?
I'm gonna bring one more guy in the middle. I don't hate the Robinson take. The Pittsburgh stack. The toughest part is who do you bring it back with on Jacksonville? I have some Chark. Robinson, we'll see. It's a tough matchup, but we know he's involved in the passing game. So that's kind of where I'm reserving those guys as my run it back for that. But one more guy I want to bring up, and it's more so a situation, is Indy. We talk about Detroit being bad against the run. Green Bay is right there, and they're terrible against the run. It's the highest total on the board. What do you think of Nyheim Hines? Because he's pulled this disappearing act before. He's put up a big game, then he goes away. I just feel like he fits this game very well, and maybe they want to get Taylor going and attack Green Bay on the ground, which is certainly an option, but it just feels like Nyheim Hines, a guy that nobody's going to have here in a game that I'm going to be playing a lot of. A lot of people are kind of avoiding this. Indy's defense very good, so they don't want to play anybody on the Green Bay side. But what are your thoughts on Hines? Because that's a lone guy with 25, 30-point upside.
I mean, it's a three. I don't want to say a three-headed monster running back because they're not monsters, but there's three heads, and Jonathan Taylor and Hines and Wilkins, who get some usage as well too, and they have three different tight ends in Indianapolis that can, in theory, do something as well. Assuming I don't know if Doyle's going to go or not. I haven't really talked to that. I thought it was questionable coming in today. I just don't like this team. Nobody has a high usage in Indianapolis. Like everybody is below 16, 17% as far as usage. I do think if you're going to force me to play somebody in Indy, it's probably Pittman at 4 or 5.
Yeah, I like that too. Yep.
That's my favorite play there. But I'm hoping that game doesn't go off because the touchdown variance. We saw Hines get a couple in prime time. It was a good game for him, and he has 2 outs because he, in theory, he can run the ball, and he's their best receiving back as well too. But I don't think he's the grinded out, give him 12 carries kind of guy. So
but Rodgers may force their hand. I mean, Rodgers puts up points. Well, now we're forced to score, and he's the guy in the passing game. We know they can give him some work on the ground. So it's just, again, that's more of if I'm stacking that game, I want Hines. I don't know that I'm going to use him as a one-off because I think you need a certain game type to play out, and that's Green Bay doing well. But just a guy with upside that's going to be low owned is kind of what we're searching for in tournaments.
Just seeing who the chat's talking about. They're talking about Frank Gore. That can't be serious, right? We're not playing Frank Gore in cash? No.
It sounds like they want to get Pirine more involved. I don't really like either of them. I know Pirine's kind of popping in some models and some things I'm looking at, but I can't play either of those guys, to be honest.
All right. Anything else as far as running back, or shall we talk about receiver?
I think we hit on, let me see. I just checked my line. I think we hit on, I like the Sanders call. I know you hit on him. I kind of warmed up to him over the last day or two. Without Myles Garrett, that's big news. So him not being in that lineup, I like a Sanders Eagles defense pairing. I mean, let's not pretend Baker Mayfield thrives under pressure, because he does not. He's actually terrible. So we've seen Sanders have big games. He had a big game at Pittsburgh, I believe it was. So yeah, the matchup, Cleveland's been good against the run, but you take their best defender off the field, a guy that's involved in the passing game, and a guy nobody's going to want to play. I really like that pairing here as well.
I'm not sure if you saw this, but Lattimore not expected to play for New Orleans. If you care about that's news. If you're a big fan of wide receiver, quarterback matchups, you got to assume that'll help out the Atlanta side as far as we're expecting Ridley to be back. Of course, Julio gets a bump as well too. And it's kind of sort of the same deal as far as running back, as far as receiver, we have a running back. Davante Adams is expected to score, at least according to projections, 4.5 more fantasy points on DK than the next closest guy. Indianapolis has been a good defensive team. They haven't played anybody yet. Davante Adams is essentially matchup proof. And what is it, Xavier Rhodes? I don't care. I think he's a perfectly fine play. It's not, I like the dome at this time of year. Sure, why not? But I don't need Adams, but I'm also getting to him because I just happen to have the salary and I don't really know where else to use it. What would you give a take as far as Davante? This is your team, and the injury. I think he's off the injury list at all, like altogether. Right? He practiced and he's fine. Right? Nothing to worry about.
He's good to go. I think one wrench could be Allen Lazard coming back. I mean, it's not going to take away. Adams is still going to get a ton of targets here, but maybe it caps that ceiling a little bit. I still like him a lot, and it's more so like we talked about with a pairing of either Hines or I do like Pittman, like you brought up. Kind of stacking that game, or you try to get away from some of the Dalvin ownership. I mean, he's about half of that. So the problem is there's nowhere to spend your money. And that's what's driving up ownership as well is, you roster a Taysom, you get some more of these value running backs. And then it's like you have a treasure chest left over. Well, people are going to go to Cook. They're going to go to Adams. So just something to watch out for there. But this dude can thrive in any matchup. And you mentioned it. Indy's been good defensively, but I still think they're somewhat vulnerable against the pass. I would prefer an Adams over an Aaron Jones, who we didn't talk about, but more so in that stack, like I mentioned with Adams.
Somebody just mentioned that it's supposed to rain in Cleveland. And I thought for whatever reason, weather was fine, but I just pulled up Ross report. I went ahead and dropped it in the YouTube chat. YouTube, like, subscribe. It helps out the channel. We do appreciate that. It is orange in Cleveland once again, because why wouldn't it be? Rain highly likely in this game, could be wet all along, as well as pregame, meaning a likely focus on the ground game. Of course, Roth, again, he'll give you a more the most updated update, 12:30. Let you know what's going on as far as that game. And for what it's worth, 10 to 15 mile per hour winds in Jacksonville. Who cares about that? We saw Ben chucking it like in 30 mile per hour winds. Ben
don't care. And this back to the Miles Sanders and the Eagles defense take. It's going to be ugly. They want to run the ball. Wet conditions can create some turnovers. I prefer that side over trying to guess what Cleveland running back it's going to be. And I know both guys were good last week, but that was a matchup that they ran the ball about 700 times because of the win. Philadelphia, very good against the run here. So Miles Sanders becoming more appealing by the minute.
All right. The secondary receivers after Adams, we're looking at Keenan Allen. Nice matchup here against the Jets. McLaurin, who's just been phenomenal. A good matchup for him. In the Minnesota guys, I don't know how you decide between Thielen and Jefferson. Just sort of mix and match, I suppose. Jefferson's been better of late, but wouldn't surprise me if Thielen, all of a sudden takes him over today. I do like Julio over Calvin, but also the ownership, is showing that as well too. And then there's Michael. Michael Thomas is a scary one for me. I feel like I think Jamina does a great job, but I think 15% is a little too ambitious as far as his projected ownership today, because I suspect people are somewhat scared with the questionable quarterback situation back there and the ability that Taysom may have to throw the ball. Your thoughts as far as this next collection? They're all sort of fine. Does anybody stand out amongst the rest?
Julio really stands out. I mean, in FanDuel, you can have a lot of fun with these Taysom lineups. I mean, how often do we get to stack an entire game with both quarterbacks? So, a Matt Ryan, a Taysom Hill, and then, mix in some of these pass catchers, whether it's Kamara, whether it's Thomas. But I really love the spot for Julio. Ridley, I'm going to have some Ridley as well. I don't even hate the double stack there, but no Lattimore is huge news here for Julio Jones. So as big of a ceiling as anybody, Davante Adams included, at a cheaper price, at lower ownership. Julio really stands out in this group. I don't mind Ridley. I don't mind Keenan Allen, especially in a pairing with Justin Herbert. We know how bad that Jets defense is against the pass, but Julio, a guy I'm very, very high on this week.
I skipped over the highest projected on receiver, Jacoby Myers for New England, who's at an absolutely ridiculous usage. Of course, we talked earlier that we think maybe New England just throws the ball like 20 times today. Because who else are you going to throw it to? You throw it to Myers, and he was a preseason guy that was great in preseason, but he's been great the last couple of weeks. He threw a touchdown last week. Good for him. It feels like the sites have not upped him enough. 4.9K on DK, 6K on FanDuel. I think he's a really strong fade in tournaments. I'm going to have some in tournaments, but it seems like he probably shouldn't be the guy that you want to be way over the field on in tournaments. Is that a good take? Is that a bad take? What are your thoughts?
I have zero.
Okay.
I talked to. I don't like Cam either, so that's probably part of it. If you're playing Cam, like we said, he's probably the guy. But can he continue to have 35, 40% target shares each and every week? I don't know. And I think they do want to run the ball a little bit more here. So the matchup is certainly there, but he feels like the guy you should play in cash. So you get your exposure there. He's cheap. He opens things up. Tournaments, I think it's one of the easier fades of the week, to be honest.
Allen, McLaurin, Jefferson, Michael Thomas, anybody that kind of stand out for you, or just kind of grab on your shares as far as those, or what?
Really like McLaurin. You get worried with Alex Smith at the helm, but he's still getting his targets here. I think this game is one that could go over the total pretty significantly. So those are the games that we seek out. So I like McLaurin. I don't mind Allen, like I said. I think Mike Williams is a solid play there with Herbert, a double stack, certainly viable there as well. But McLaurin out of that group really stands out as a guy you could play in cash. I know the prices come up a little bit, but tournaments, we know that upside is massive.
Are you running back the Chargers double stack? You're running it back with Mims? He's still only 3-3, and he's on the field for every snap, and he's getting some ball. Flacco looked competent last week, and the Chargers always find a way to lose games or make it really, really close. I'm landing on some Mims. Is that a DK specific at 3-3?
Yeah, he's the guy. It's kind of the same challenge you have with Pittsburgh is who are you running it back with? There I think you have better options with Chark and Robinson. The Jets, I mean, we're talking Frank Gore in the chat. We're talking P. Ryan. I think it is Mims. When Darnold's in there, it's Crowder. He loves throwing the slot. He loves throwing the Crowder, but we haven't seen that same connection with Flacco. So Mims is cheap enough to eat up some of that Keenan Allen cost where it makes sense on DK for sure.
Yeah, you referenced the Pittsburgh receivers, and I was having a conversation with somebody else. Even how do you? I think they're all basically the same price on FanDuel, and pick one for cash. I don't know. I guess it's Deontay Johnson is the quote unquote safest one, assuming he doesn't get hurt. But that's happened 5 times this year in the middle of a game, give or take. Who do you just rotate through? Do you have a strong take as far as who the best? It is Juju's birthday today. Does that factor into your decision before you answer? Understand that Juju Smith is celebrating a birthday today. He's really young. He's still only 24.
Say, what is he, 19? I mean, we know that too. I think Juju's probably the safest of the group. I like Deontay as the cheapest of the group, but to be honest, I'm going to rotate all these guys in. I'm going to build a bunch of different stacks using 2 of these guys and just mixing and matching in all kinds of lineups. So Juju's probably your cash game guy. The salaries are close enough where you basically choose whoever you want. He's shown that good rapport with Ben. Looks like he's back as the alpha. I love Johnson as well, and we know Claypool has a massive ceiling. So any of them in play, but Juju, to answer your question in cash, probably the safest of them.
Just play wherever you want.
I agree, Blender. Just play whoever the hell you want.
Devin's having some fun with a soundboard that we're kind of working our way in. He told us this, by the way, about 12 seconds before the show started. He's like, I might just throw some sounds on you. I'm like, okay. Let's see how that works.
There's even better ones. Let's see if he busts
it out. What else do you have? Give us something else. Hit another button.
Deposit boners.
Yes.
Deposit boners. Dan Box in the chat. That's for the old school people.
That's the one I was waiting on. I was wondering if he was going to pop that one out.
Oh, speaking of deposit boners, I should kind of segue to this. Yes, that's a sentence that was just said here on the YouTube. Hey, if you like what Devin's showing off as far as all the tools, they're going to kind of dive into that more as far as the lineup HQ and the next show that's coming up. That's going to be following us. Just stay on the stream. It's not going to go anywhere. They might even show your 6-pack in between. I'm not really sure what's going on there. That sometimes they do that, depending on how long it takes to change shows over. But, you get $5 off, 5 smackers off your first month of RG Core 4 premium football, baseball, basketball, and golf basketball right around the corner, less than 30 days away. I cannot believe that from the NBA starting up again. Super excited about that. There you go. We segued. I just had a deposit boner segue. How about that? One more, Devin. Give us
all we're missing is Crane's baseball take. You know what I'm talking about. If we could find that one, that would make my day.
Devin, challenge accepted.
Speaking of deposit boners, let's find that Crane clip.
And Dan's in the chat. He thoroughly enjoyed that. All right. Brandon Cooks. Yeah, revenge game. Brandon Cooks, sneaky revenge game. Really, really cheap today on DK, where he's 5.1K. He's landing in some of my cash lineups. It's like I was talking about. I'm a little bit nervous about New England just kind of controlling the ball, but that price is too good. He's been really, really solid outside of the one time where I rostered him and he got 0. Besides that,
we've all been there for sure.
But your thoughts as far as Cooks today or anybody else? Fuller? Sure, why not?
I like the price on Cooks for sure. I think that's decent value. Let me look at my lineup, see who else we're playing. We mentioned Pittman. I think that's a solid option. The Cincinnati guys we haven't hit on. I mean, we've seen T. Higgins really emerge as the guy there, and Tyler Boyd, we know, gets a ton of targets as well. If we're expecting Burrow to have to throw the ball 40, 50 times, those guys are 10, 12, 15 target guys under 6K. So value there. The Minnesota guys are intriguing as well. I really like Thielen. If everyone's kind of congregating around Jefferson, don't mind going to Thielen. So a lot of in that middle range, like we always get between the Pittsburgh guys, the Minnesota guys, the Cincinnati guys. I mentioned Julio. And then one value option. I really like Jakeem Grant here. So it remains super cheap. He's going to have to be a part of this offense and a guy that's going to get targets. So Jakeem Grant, kind of my off the radar value play this week.
I'll give you some on the other side of that game. KJ Hamler, back-to-back games with 10 targets, I believe, is just 3.6K on DK. We talked about Mims as a potential cheapie. You're looking for a cheapie on Jacksonville or just a run back on Jacksonville, still minimum. Chris Conley, you don't feel good about it, but there is some upside there at 3K, so I don't hate that either. I would just throw those guys in the conversation. It's wild that AJ Green is 3.6K and T.Y. Hilton is 4.2K, and we have no interest. It's just whatever, man. I've always believed in you play somebody at the right price, fade them at the wrong price, and I think those are still the wrong price. Maybe, I'm not sure. We shall see. Yeah,
I know. I almost got sucked in on the AJ Green, 3.6K for AJ Green. Are you kidding me? But just can't do it. I mean, we saw that little glimpse, the little flash, in the middle of the season. He started off rough, was getting all those air yards, had a couple big games, but it's really become a Higgins and Boyd show there. So even 3.6K, not enough to entice me enough to get AJ Green in any lineups.
What are we doing with Carolina? We haven't really talked about Carolina outside of Mike Davis. I assume Teddy's going to play with nothing official. Actives 11:30, but it seems like he wants to play, and I don't really have a lot of their receivers. Could that be a problem? I don't think I have any of them right now.
Not really a problem. I mean, I'm so big on Mike Davis. I don't have a ton either. And let's not forget PJ Walker and Robbie Anderson have some sort of connection back to the Temple days. So, I think if there is a pairing, that's probably it. DJ Moore's been, you talked Hollywood Brown. DJ Moore has been me shoveling money into the furnace every week because, he gets there once in a while, but not every week, obviously. And then Samuel, that's an intriguing play as well. He's a guy that's getting the ball all over the field. They're finally using him correctly after a few years, giving him some running back touches and different creative ways to get the ball in his hands. So I don't have a ton either. I do think that's a very stackable game. Two defenses that are both bad against the run and the pass, according to a Football Outsiders DVOA. So it is a game that I'm stacking, but that's always a question. It's similar to Pittsburgh receivers. What Carolina receiver do I play this week? If I got to pick one, I'm just going to stick with Robbie Anderson.
There's no cheat code like there is on FanDuel as far as tight end. Taysom Hill, again, 4.5K on FanDuel. Projected ownership, by the way, is 75% for tournaments. And, I wouldn't bet the under on that. It's all about, how many of your friends out there are lurking that, didn't crack the code. Some people just don't scroll down that low, and that's, the only people that aren't – I guess people with Galaxy brain it too and say, nobody's going to play – Mark Andrews on FanDuel, and he can score 2 touchdowns, which he can. I guess you can throw him the flex too. But all right, DK specific. Is there any tight end you like dollar for dollar?
I like Logan Thomas this week. 3,300, Cincinnati, second most fantasy points allowed, 2 tight ends. So that's the way to go. I think a lot of people are going to go to Andrews there at cheap price. We know he's got that 2 touchdown upside, but Logan Thomas, not say stands out, but I like the matchup. I like the price. It opens some things up to pay for Devontae, for Dalvin Cook to go that route, or as a nice run it back option with those Cincinnati and Burrow stacks.
According to the chat, apparently there were people in RG touting the Hill fade. All right, maybe it'll be Blender. Blender, I'll play whoever you want. He's going to be on next. Maybe he'll speak to that. I think he actually plays mostly in DK, so forget that. But, hey, you know what? It's certainly possible that Taysom gets 8 points and a tight end puts up 25, I suppose. I'm landing on DK on the chalk mostly, which I don't feel good about, but that's where I'm at right now as far as Andrews and Hawkinson. I'm hoping Hawkinson's toe's fine. I'm hoping, Stafford has the ability to throw a football, which is important, when we're relying on DJ Hawkinson. But, we're talking about all the injuries on the Detroit side. You would think a couple more targets would shuffle his way. I don't think Fant is healthy. I'm not privy to their, the medical staff, but It doesn't appear like he's healthy. I don't trust that if he was, I would be interested. But Hurst is kind of sort of someone interesting as far as a run back in that New Orleans game. I'm with you, Logan Thomas at 3-3. If you're pinching pennies, Hunter Henry against the Jets, sure, why not? Ebron, if you're going away from those receivers or if you're double stacking, I have no issue with that. But nothing is really spectacular. We kind of referenced the defenses. Pittsburgh, Luton is an absolute statue, and Pittsburgh blitzes a lot. This is a recipe for disaster. They're probably going to be behind, so they're going to become one-dimensional. It feels like a game where Pittsburgh's going to rack up the sacks and get like 6 or 7 sacks and cause all sorts of havoc. I don't know if they're going to get a pick six or a sack, fumble, touchdown. I don't know if those are things you really can't predict, but pressure usually leads to things like that. If you have all the money in the world, I'm assuming Pittsburgh's your favorite defense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no doubt. If you can get there in cash, I know we like to play a cheaper defense, open things up. But, again, if we could drop a matchup that we want, this would be the one. So if you can find the money for them, it makes a lot of sense. That pairing with Connor makes a lot of sense. But as far as cheaper defense, as I mentioned, Carolina, just have a good feeling about them paired with Davis. And then the Chargers against the Jets, I think make a lot of sense as well, even in a pairing with Calen Blage. So there are some cheap defenses in play. The Broncos are 2,400. There's some other ones that stick out on DraftKings, but I'm mainly sticking with Carolina off the board. Dallas at 2.2 makes a lot of sense. Kind of a play off of Dalvin Cook. We know Kirk Cousins can turn the ball over. I know you were talking about him earlier, but going off the board at defense seems to be the way to go this season. So those are some of the options that I'm looking at.
We got about 5 minutes or so before we make away. Step aside for Tambo and Blender. They're going to be focusing more on tournaments. They're going to be showing off the lineup HQ tool here at Rotogrinders. Again, get $5 off. The link's going to be dropped in chat for you guys. Get $5 off for Core 4 for your first month: football, baseball, basketball, and golf. I see some questions loading up there as well too. So start asking some questions. I'll do our best to knock those out. By the way, for defenses on DK, I will just add. Yeah, I got to some Bengals just because they're cheap, and Alex Smith, I assume, will take some sacks because he can't move back there. I feel like great story, but I'm scared watching him.
Oh yeah, every time he takes a hit, you're like, oh man. I mean, it is a tremendous story, but he's lost some of that athleticism, obviously, that he had. He used to be a guy that could move around, run a little bit, but yeah, I don't hate Cincy's defense either. I really like that game, but and don't forget the Eagles as well. I forgot to bring them up. I like the Browns before they lost Garrett, but. Philly in that kind of nasty weather against Baker, get some pressure on him, could cause some turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Smith is giving me those like Samuel Jackson, unbreakable Mr. Glass vibes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just concerned for him, man. I want him to be safe. All right, so some correlation plays. Some of your favorite stacks.
Love Pittsburgh, mixing and matching in those different receivers. On FanDuel, you can get very creative with Taysom, stacking different ways, using him naked. Or stacking that entire game, using Matt Ryan, using Taysom Hill. There's not many opportunities you get ever to use two quarterbacks, and they correlate so well together. So an entire game stack there makes sense. And then Herbert to his receivers, and then some of those correlations with running backs and defense. Blage with the Chargers, Connor with the Steelers, and Davis with the Panthers.
Do you have any thoughts as far as Matt Breida likely being back today and how that affects Ahmed for Miami? I'm just avoiding the situation. What say you?
I have a little bit of Ahmad, I believe it is. So I worry a little bit, but I think that's what's kind of keeping the ownership down. If we knew he was the guy at 4.8K, he'd have a lot more ownership here. Not a great matchup, but not one you have to avoid either. Miami's one of those teams that wants to use one guy. They're not spreading it out to a bunch of different guys. So I have some. I'll be over the field on them, but not going to go crazy with it.
Yeah, the chat's talking about the Detroit defense if Teddy doesn't go, and I agree. I think that they become interesting if Teddy doesn't go. If Teddy goes, obviously they take a slight hit, but also massive variance as far as defenses. They're just really hard to predict. Pick one of these two: Antonio Gibson or Gio Bernard on FanDuel.
Gibson. It's just the touchdown upside. If you said DraftKings, maybe I'm thinking Gio just for some of the pass catching upside, but Gibson there, not really close for me.
Adrian Peterson, good or bad value this week? I'm playing some Adrian Peterson. He's ridiculously cheap, and he helps me go get multiple studs. I think I'm a little higher on Adrian Peterson than you are.
I'm gonna avoid. I left the damn show when Adrian Peterson was brought up, so that tells you where I'm at on AP. I'm
glad you're. I don't want to answer this question. Flacco or Dalton for DK cash? Neither.
Why not just play Hill?
Yeah,
or spend a few more dollars and get to Burrow. I don't see either of those guys. I mean, if I got to pick one, it's going to be Dalton, but
yeah,
I don't really like either of those guys.
Dalton's a little bit interesting if you want to like run it back with the, it's pretty concise. It's either going to be Cook, Thielen, or Jefferson, or maybe two of those three. And we talk about, Dalton's cheap and his receivers are talented and they're cheap. We don't know. They did mention they're going to have an adjustment as far as their line. Hopefully that's an improvement. Dalton coming back from concussion, I think he had COVID as well too. I think he had issues smelling, but hopefully it's all sort of baked into that price, I suppose. Is it an Antonio Brown week? They're playing Monday. Antonio Brown.
We'll talk him on the showdown slates.
I don't know who they're even playing against. I have no takes. Probably a season long, but I couldn't tell you who's playing Monday. I have no idea. Hines or Gio for tournament?
I like Hines. He's going to have way less ownership. It's almost the same guy, and that one could be a shootout. So give me Hines.
They're asking about prop bets. I wish I was in a state where I can dabble in the sports gambling world. I'm not right now currently, so I don't have any winners for y'all. I did give out a monkey knife fight. I liked Blage over, and I liked Marquise Brown over 10.5 fantasy points as well too. Let's see. Here we got Noah Fant or Hayden Hurst. I think Hurst is safer.
Hurst, that should be a good game environment.
You want Duke or Blage? Basically the slike price on DK.
Blage, I'll be underweight on Duke Johnson.
Rex Burkhead on DK, like it just could be a huge mess on New England. I feel like it's a little chasey as far as those touchdowns. I'm not playing Rex. What say you?
Think you cash out your chips on Rex. Go to the cage and be done with it.
Josh Jacobs or McLaurin FanDuel Flex. I guess that's an all-day slate. They're playing the Chiefs tonight.
Man, people throwing these Sunday night, Monday night guys at us. I will go with McLaurin still.
Favorite cash core plays?
Mike Davis for sure. Taysom Hill's got to be in there, and Dalvin Cook. I mean, it's stick with the chalk in cash games.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the money for Mike Davis. For me, I didn't get there. I mean, I'm talking about Blage, and I'm talking about guys like Johnson. That's kind of sort of where I got, and then I can spend up on Dalvin, and then I had money for Adams as well too in some iterations. Let's see, Boyd and Goddard. Goddard's so cheap, but I think he's terrible. Or Clay, but it's tight end. Or Claypool and Logan Thomas for cash. I'm not playing any of those guys for cash, for the record. Maybe
Boyd and Goddard's probably safer in cash. Claypool, Thomas, probably a little bit more upside.
We got Tambo and Blender coming up next. They're going to be showing off the lineup HQ tool here at Rotogrinders. Beer, give the people something good. Let's finish strong. What do you have for them?
Kalen Blage, 2 touchdowns today.
Revenge, because it's revenge, or maybe it's
just because the Jets are that bad.
Oh, what a weird week where Kalen Blage is like, yeah, that's what we're looking at. But I have way too much Kalen Blage. I hope you are correct. He was Chris Prince. They know him as Beer. You guys know him as Beer Makers fan. I was Dean. Devin, tell us something. Give us one thing before we go, Devin. What do you have for us? Anything? We live in the world of a salary cap. We do live in the world of a salary cap. Look at that, right?
Well played. He was holding on to that one. I'm glad you gave him that opportunity.
I wasn't sure if he was like transitioning over or in the middle of eating his kale or something like that. But all right, he was Beer. I was Dean. This was football. Good luck today. We're out of here. Holler.
Good luck, guys. Thanks for watching. Fantasy Bar with a special happy hour edition for week 11. You want to fit Dalvin Cook in those lineups? We've got some of my favorite mid-range and value plays, nobody over 7K on DraftKings, including my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the Fantasy Bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 11 edition, Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack this season. Cruising right along, but good to be back here once again, providing 6 of my favorite plays across both FanDuel and DraftKings for Week 11. Before we get into the plays, guys, do me a favor. Take a second. Click that thumbs up button on YouTube. I greatly appreciate it. Really helps us out. As I always say, that's the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get notified when these videos are coming out. So like I said in the open, we're going to do a little bit of a happy hour. What does that mean? If you're new around here, that means we're going to slash prices just like your favorite bar down the road and give you some of my favorite guys. Nobody over 7K on DraftKings, nobody over 8K on FanDuel, including the Beast of the Week. Try to make room for Dalvin Cook in those lineups for you guys. Now, before we get into week 11, let's take a quick look back at week 10. Obviously, disappointing performance from Michael Thomas. Expecting more. That price got me on DraftKings, and that windy game in Cleveland was no help to Austin Hooper. Just a bunch of guys that did not help you win tournaments. So let's turn the page here, talk some week 11. Let's start with wide receiver. We're going to go with Amari Cooper of the Cowboys. So we talked Dalvin Cook, going to be obviously the highest owned player on this slate with good reason. The guy has been a stud. This is a great matchup. But what about the other side? If Minnesota's scoring a bunch of points, Dallas is going to have to do something here. And I love this spot for the passing game. They get Andy Dalton back. Nothing to be too excited about, but the point is it's going to be better than the Ben DiNucci's of the world. Guys, they've been rolling out at quarterback, Garrett Gilbert. So Dalton back in there. This price on Amari Cooper, very fair. In fact, cheapest price we've gotten on him on DraftKings this season in quite some time. Actually, looking back, it's been a while since we've got 5,400 Amari Cooper. And with Dallas playing from behind, like we said, they're going to have to throw the ball. 7-point road dogs here in Minnesota. And the Vikings have struggled with the wide receiver position. 4th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. I know they have a plethora of options there in Dallas, but Amari Cooper, the top dog and the guy I want here in week 11 against the Vikings. All right, let's go to the running back position. A guy I never thought would be in the six-pack, but here we are in 2020. We're rolling Calen Blage of the Chargers. Now, I've had some disparaging things to say about Calen Blage over the years, but it's really hard to argue with what we've seen over the past 2 weeks. And I know, short sample, small sample police, come on after me. 20 touches per week here over the last 2 games for Calen Blage. Coach comes out and says, we want to get this guy even more involved. Find ways to get him the ball. He's getting the ball through the air, on the ground. The Chargers, big home favorites here. 2nd highest projected total on this slate this week against the Jets. And the Jets, we know, worse against the pass, no doubt. You're going to see a lot of Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, all those guys projected to have a lot of ownership. And Blage will certainly have some as well. But the Jets, not very good against running backs either. Bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed here. Got to put our biases aside here. He's away from Adam Gase. Maybe that's the key to free him here. Calen Blage in a great spot and tremendous prices is a big home favorite here against the New York Jets. All right, let's go to tight end. It's been a dumpster fire every single week this season. We have no stud Kelsey's, Kittles on this slate. Let's save some money with Logan Thomas of Washington. So matchup is what this one's all about. Cincinnati has really struggled with the tight end position. In fact, 2nd most fantasy points allowed to tight ends this season. We know Washington dealing with a very thin target tree. We know McLaurin will get some targets. J.D. McKissic going to get about 28 targets per week, but that still leaves some targets for Logan Thomas. And in fact, the Bengals, we know, bad against the tight end, and of course, bad against the pass as well. 29th in DVOA against the pass this season. I think we could get a sneaky shootout in this game, but let's save some money here. Logan Thomas cheap, going to give us some targets, and I think he finds the end zone here against this terrible Cincinnati defense. All right, moving on. Pick number 4. Let's go to the quarterback position and roll with Big Ben Roethlisberger of the Steelers. So Ben been a model of consistency this season. Multiple touchdown passes in 8 of the 9 games this season. This matchup about as good as it gets here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have established they really want to throw the ball. We saw it last week in that windy game. They were still throwing the ball around. Even when leading big, it was pass first here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't mind going to James Conner. I think he'll be a lower owned option at the running back position, but Big Ben's the guy I really want here. Jacksonville, bottom 3 in almost anything we want to look at against the pass. DVOA, fantasy points allowed. We could go on and on and on here with how bad this Jacksonville defense has been. And the Steelers' highest projected team total on this week's slate. And we know that correlates very well with quarterback success, but Steelers projected for 4+ touchdowns. I got to think Ben's involved in at least 2 of those, hopefully 3 or more. But I love the spot for Big Ben against Jacksonville. All right, moving along. Let's stay right there with Pittsburgh. We like Big Ben. The question is always, what Steelers receiver do we target here? I think you can go with any of them, but we're going to target the cheapest of the 3, and that's Deontay Johnson So this guy just continues to get targets, and they all do. You look across the board, they get double-digit targets for all three of these guys. So this is definitely a spot where you can target any of them. But give me the cheaper, like I said, Diontae Johnson, the cheapest of the three on DraftKings. FanDuel, he's tied with Claypool. The point is, when this guy's been in the lineup, he has put up numbers. He gets target. Now it says 10-plus targets in 5 of his 8 games. It's really about 5 in 6.5 games. Some of those games, he was injured. So when he's healthy and he's out there, to me, he's the alpha of this receiving group. As good as Juju's been lately, as big a games as we've seen from Chase Claypool, I think Diontae Johnson, the best receiver. Now, I don't want to disparage those guys. In fact, I think this is a great spot to double stack. I didn't want to pile up a bunch of Steelers here in the 6-pack. We already mentioned Connor as a nice pivot at the running back position, Ben and Diontae, but I also love Juju and Claypool here. Are going to have a ton of double stacks, but if I have to pick one, the guy I think that outperforms the other, it's Diontae Johnson this week here against Jacksonville. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 11, but before we do that, guys, we're going to continue to say thank you, the great audience here at the Fantasy Bar. We're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest, absolutely free to play. All you got to do is get in the comment section, make sure you click that thumbs up button. All you got to do is guess fantasy points for my Beast of the Week on DraftKings. Closest guess is going to win themselves either a free week of Rotogrinders Premium, includes everything we have, including Lineup HQ, building a ton of lineups or one lineup in a matter of moments, and everything else behind the curtain. So if you're not a premium subscriber, you get a chance to check it all out. Or if you already are, and thank you for that, we'll send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So without further ado, let's wrap up week 11. My favorite play, Matt's the Beast of the Week. All right, this time we're going to continue the happy hour trend here. We're going to keep those prices down. We're going to go back to the running back position. We're rolling Mike Davis of the Panthers, this week's Beast of the Week. Now, I absolutely love this spot for Mike Davis. This was the first guy I wanted to plug in the lineups for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into some of them here, but mainly the recency bias here. We haven't really seen a massive game out of Mike Davis. Now, we know the last few weeks, Christian McCaffrey been back in the lineup, been tough for him to put up numbers here. The price also is down at $4K last week, up to $6,800. I think that's actually going to scare some people away. Now, I know we were paying more for him earlier in the season when he was the guy, but sometimes it's a mental game, and early ownership projections are nowhere near what I thought they would be here on Mike Davis. So let's take advantage here, mainly because of the matchup. Detroit has been absolutely terrible against the run. In fact, nobody been worse. My Packers been pretty bad, but the Detroit Lions allow the most fantasy points to the running back position over the season, over the last 4 weeks. Any metric you want to look at, this is not a good run D. Davis and the Panthers favored here at home. I don't care who the quarterback is. Looks like it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. I don't care if it's a backup here. This is a great spot. We're saving a ton of money on what you would pay on Christian McCaffrey. Mike Davis, easily my favorite.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toteg and Tambo, back for another edition of the Sunday free Lineup HQ show with my boy Blender HD, Blender Head, Jordan Cooper. Hopefully on top of you on those GPP leaderboards this weekend, but I got a different plan for that, so we'll talk about it. How you doing, Jordan?
Good. I'm liking this slate. This slate, this is going to be one of those slates that either I'm going to win a lot or I'm going to lose every lineup.
Vomit stacks everywhere. Right? There's a lot of different options here. We're going to get into it. Just so you guys know, producer Devin's going to throw the link there in the chat. If you guys aren't signed up yet for Rotogrinders, you can hop on there, get $5 off your first month. Check out all the stuff we're going through. If you guys haven't had time to go back and see the video that Jordan and I did to start the season in Lineup HQ, highly recommend sometime during this week for a little personal self-study, whatever it might be, where you can get into it and get a little bit more knowledge as far as the actual tool is concerned for Lineup HQ. I think that's great. But Jordan, you said it, man. Lots to talk about here. Great slate ahead. I'm excited about it as well. We got to get this out of the way. We'll make it as fast as possible. But it's the Taysom Hill situation, right? We're starting at quarterback. I look here, the latest, even on DraftKings now at 4,800, he's popping up as by far the highest owned. We'll see how accurate this is when it comes out, but typically we're pretty good when it comes to that. So give us your, 2-minute or less spiel here on DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever you're doing with Taysom Hill today.
Oh, I don't even know if I need 2 minutes. Well, Taysom Hill is a tight end on FanDuel. Just play him.
Yeah.
Okay, we're done with the FanDuel analysis.
Done.
Because when you get to play a quarterback in the tight end spot for nearly minimum price, when tight end is a wasteland, like go do it. On DraftKings, it's more interesting. I think Taysom Hill, because of his rushing equity, like it has a great floor. He's probably the highest floor quarterback on the slate for the price for 4,800 in cash games. I think that's perfect. That's perfectly fine. The problem comes in with GPPs is that you can't expect the passing volume to be that high. So like stacking him with Thomas, like especially Thomas at 7,300, like for Thomas to get there, he needs like 100 yards, multiple touchdowns, something like, do you think they're going to throw that much? And then if you double stack with Taysom, like he's cheap enough that if you wanted to stack with like Sanders or Cook or something, I could see that. That's viable. Also, playing Taysom naked is perfectly viable, but he's also going to be like a 20% owned quarterback. So like how much are you gaining by doing so? I think there are paths for so many of the other quarterbacks on the slate to beat a naked Taysom lineup that like I'm not using him. Playing them in my double up, sure, great. But like I'm more likely, like right now in my GPP build, I'm playing 120 lineups. I have zero exposure to that game as a whole. Because if Taysom Hill is going to have 80 yards rushing and 150 yards passing, like I don't see this game shooting out. So like playing Julio on the other side and Ridley coming off of an injury for 7K, like it just, to me, it lowers the ceilings of like every player in the game. As long as he play, I mean, hell, he could play one series, be horrible, and Winston comes in, right? That could happen. There's a non-zero chance that happens. But me personally, I'm not stacking with him, and if I can't stack with him, I'm not going to play a high-owned quarterback one-off. So if naked Taysom lineups get there, then I guess I lose this week.
Yeah, so I'm with you on a couple things there. With FanDuel, I was talking about on the Tourney Takes pod. I was thinking, even on FanDuel, maybe there's ways, but the more I look back, and that's why this final show of the week, typically I give you exactly where I'm at, everything that's going on. It's like you said, on FanDuel, there's just no other way. You can't get that type of production. It's a one-off, a onesie position, basically impossible to get that volume and, lock in those things. If we get that one series and he's out for whatever crazy reason, then so be it, and we eat it and we move on to next week. That's why we play the game we do, but that leaves FanDuel, like you said. On DraftKings, one thing that's interesting, like you said, there is cash for sure. I think it's just an easy plug and play for me at 4.8K, get the production, see what happens. But, two things. One is narrative based. I would stack him up with Jared Cook because that matchup is just so bad. And I don't want to do double tight end on FanDuel because you have to use Taysom in the tight end spot. So on DraftKings, I could get there. I think that's, like you said, if he's shorter passes, I want him with a cheaper guy where I could actually see some ceiling out of the two of them for less than 10K. That makes sense to me. And then the last thing I would say is it's a rare scenario, but like a one-off spot, depending on how many lineups you have, you and I both have a lot. I would use him in maybe the time I would like to use him naked is in something like a Washington stack where I could go, I love McLaurin. I think McKissick, if the game goes back and forth, or a Logan Thomas, but I don't really love Alex Smith, and I could see him beating Alex Smith. So where most would have that three-man stack all piled up with Alex Smith and two Washington guys, I could just save a little bit of money off of Alex Smith and go down to Taysom Hill. So that's sort of where I would go with that. Anything else we need to talk about here with Taysom, or do you want to get into the fun stuff and the vomit stacks, starting with quarterback?
Right. I think outside of that, like there's your Taysom analysis. There you go.
Yeah, I like it. I think that's good.
So I believe an overview of this slate. This is how I'm viewing it. Well, this whole year we've had slates where there were multiple games that had 50 plus totals. So we've had games where the highest total is 55, but you still have like three games that are like 52, 53, 54. So the higher the totals, the more scoring in the slate. That means obviously the more available fantasy points that there are. Now on a week where the highest total we have is the Packers-Colts game at like 51 and a half. And the lowest total game is 45 and a half, which is now the Eagles and the Browns game. So a very tight, condensed amount. I mean, within 5 points of each other, all 11 games are. On slates like this, where there's no clear, like obvious game environment, I think there's more value. I'm viewing the slate very much like MLB, where you don't have like cores, right? You don't have some like, Fenway Park against some garbage lefty, where like the chalk, it's like it's the obvious spot. There's no obvious spot here. So I think that with these middling totals, if you can nail the game that goes significantly over, you win. Like you double stack that game. If it happens to be Texans Patriots, instead of it being a 49 total, it goes 62. Like that may be the highest total on the whole slate by like 20 points. So if you have like a 3+1 or something of that game, like you're more likely to win. So my attitude on this slate is that I'm planting flags on game environments. And I'm in my 120 lineups, I'm planting flags on 3 games, and then I'm taking multiple pieces. Like I don't want to take the game and then not have the right piece. So I'm spending more of my lineups on like the third wide receiver and the tight ends. And I'm just like, I'm making as many 3+1s as possible. And if this is the game, I have a good shot at first place. Now, if it's not the game, if it happens to be a game that I didn't plant my flag on, then I lose. That's what I said at the beginning of the show. Like I chose 3 games and I've one-offs and secondary stacks of other stuff. Sure. Great.
Yep.
But I think that if you could find the one game that goes significantly over, that may be the only game that hits that type of total.
Yeah, I do like that, especially just planting your flag in general. Like you said, finding 3 games is plenty, and now you get to have more combinations of each. Like I said, if it doesn't happen this week, maybe it will next week. You only have to have in NFL, especially one good week can make up for the whole year. So you may as well go after it in that sense. For those out there making multiple lineups or getting into it, that's definitely the way to go. One thing is, are you talking about New England and Houston and using Darren Fells and Akins and these types of guys? Is that where you're going?
Well, actually, I'm under on that game because that's going to be like the chalky game. So like a lot of people with the Myers being chalk, with Watson and Newton getting, if you're not playing Taysom Hill, you're probably playing one of those.
Watson, Duke Johnson as well.
Right, Duke Johnson's there. Brandon Cooks is there. Like a lot of the median value. I like those players for like cash games. I think they have the best shots at their median. Okay, so like, okay, but I mean, if Brandon Cooks has 16 points, is that going to kill me if I don't have him? No. If Myers has 16 points, is that going to kill me if I don't have him? No. Duke Johnson, saying all those players. So being that it's going to be owned, I'm less. I have pieces, sure, yes. I mean that they project very well, but as a combination, if that game just ends up being Patriots running the ball a whole ton, so I hope it goes under. And we're getting news that the inactives are coming in. So as they come in, we'll be pointing them out. So Bridgewater is active today. Okay. So they have 3 quarterbacks. All 3 quarterbacks are active. So even that doesn't necessarily tell us if he's starting.
Yeah. Who else? Then let's talk about quarterback because you start here and you can kind of go with stacks. You and I tend to talk a lot, so we go a lot longer, but we've got a time limit here. So we'll talk about quarterbacks and tie it in with some stacks. One thing you just mentioned that made me think of a secondary stack was with that Houston New England game was I think a lot of people have Duke Johnson with Myers. Right. That's, sort of what you'll see in cash games, especially as well. And I kind of like, I don't mind Myers as much. I think at 4,900, that's probably fine. But I like Brandon Cooks with Myers as a secondary stack. I've seen a lot of times this season where a double wide receiver 1-1 has worked a lot more, as far as these winning GPP lineups go. So just one that stands out. I normally talk about a lot of secondary stacks as the week goes on. That's one of the things with Lineup HQ where we've talked about it in the past. You can go in and have those built in automatically, but we definitely see those when you won the slant. When we watch every week, you talk about results DB, heading on there, checking out the winning results. That's what we're seeing each week. So talk to me about these 3 games then, or I mean, maybe it'll be the quarterbacks.
Okay. You want me to tell you the 3 games I'm planting a flag on?
Let's do that. Yeah, let's go into it.
Okay, so most of my stuff, like I'm looking at my exposures right now in my lineups, and like it's so heavy on these 3 games with basically with both quarterbacks. I'm playing both quarterbacks from the games. Okay, one at a time. The first one is Cincinnati, Washington.
Nice.
So that we're talking about Burrow and we're talking about Alex Smith. I know Alex Smith isn't very exciting to roster, but Bengals, they could throw the ball 40+ times. If the Bengals are on point, like this game could turn into a shootout and Alex Smith is going to have to throw the ball more than 3 yards. So playing Smith with McLaurin and Thomas on one side is fine. There you go. You could throw in a McKissick, a Gibson. If you're doing a secondary stack, I'm less likely to stack with Gibson because he just basically vultures tight ends at the touchdowns at the end zone. But on the Burrow side, you have Burrow, you have Boyd, you have Higgins, the corpse of AJ Green. Because tight end is so crappy this week, like if you 3+1, just like if you need a tight end, throw in Drew Sample. I know he sucks, but I mean, all the tight ends suck. So if you're going to play Burrow plus Higgins and you're going to punt the tight end anyway, just play the tight end that goes along with your stack. So like running back.
They want you to say, take a sample of Drew and a sprinkle of Jeremy. Is that what they want you to do in that game?
That was kind of a fun. I thought you were quoting. I thought someone was making a joke in the chat.
Yeah,
I appreciate that now. That's a kind of a dad joke, but okay. I'll give you a 6 for effort.
Okay, thank you. No, go ahead, keep going. We got other games here.
Okay, I got that game. Then I also have Chargers Jets. I know. I'm just going to lose money on Jets. It seems like that's what I do every week.
Flacco.
Right? Why not? Joe Flacco, Mims, Crowder, Perriman. You got those guys. You got LaMichael Pirine even. He's a pass-catching running back. So if you're playing the Chargers stack, you could play Pirine in your – he's barely going to be owned. And then on the other side, you have Herbert, Allen, Henry, Williams. Kalen Blage is your running back if you're playing as a one-off or in the Jet stack in reverse. I think there are many paths for that game to dud because it's the Jets and the Chargers. So that game could end up being 14-10 because they both tend to play fairly slow. But hopefully the Jets coming out of the bye, like maybe they actually keep it competitive. Maybe the Chargers pass it a little bit more. But the game that I'm mostly on is Dallas, Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
For the primary reason that Minnesota has one of the most condensed offenses in the NFL. Dalvin Cook's going to be chalk. Jefferson's going to be chalky. Thielen, maybe not so much, but he's still going to be owned enough. So I take a look at that game and go, well, everyone's playing Cook. A lot of people are playing Jefferson. Like how many people are playing Amari Cooper or CeeDee Lamb or Dalton Schultz or Michael Gallup or Ezekiel Elliott? Andy Dalton as the reverse stack. Who's playing Dalton? I mean, so I'm like, how can I play these Vikings in a way where I'm not like kind of playing them as a one-off chalk? So to mitigate that ownership, said, let's turn this game into a shootout. Dalton is much better than Gilbert or DiNucci. He's a real NFL quarterback. So I know he's coming off of COVID, but like, why not? If people are playing Taysom Hill at 4,800, why can't I play Andy Dalton at 5,300? Yes, if the Vikings get out to a lead and start running the clock out, Dalvin Cook 34 touches, yeah, those stacks probably don't get there. But the Cowboys are cheap. Cooper's 4,400, Lamb's 5,000, Gallup's 3,700. Schultz is who cares about tight end on this slate? You could get 7 points from your tight end and win. So I take a look at this and go, like, do I want to play Vikings one-offs or do I want to correlate them so I could, if the Vikings go off, it's a game that's probably close. So the Cowboys may put up 21, 24, 28 points. And these guys at those, if they put up 21 points, 3 touchdowns, like all these guys are cheap enough that they could get 20 points with that score line. So why not put that together with the Vikings?
Yeah. I really like the Dallas side of that game that you talked about. I definitely have some Dalton, Cooper, Lamb, and then run it back with Thielen, who, like you said, not under-owned, but compared to Jefferson and definitely compared to Cook, you're going to get that side of the game a little bit, him as the lesser-owned one-off there. So I like that. I think, like you said, Dalton's a real quarterback. The COVID thing is interesting because as it pertains to golf, which the other content that I do here on Rotogrinders, it hasn't been the best for guys coming back their first week off of COVID, but football's a different animal. If he's healthy, he's been out there practicing, everything's good to go. You got to just go with the flow and expect it to go well. So I definitely have some stacks. How often can you get Amari Cooper for 5,400, Lamb 5,000, Gallup 3,700? Like these are guys, even Dalton Schultz at tight end. Again, tight end's a wasteland. It's another guy where you could throw him in there. So I think that's the side of the game I like a little bit more as the week went on. I'm with you on the Herbert side. Flacco's elite. I would really use some Perryman over there. I know Crowder's in the mix, gets a lot of targets, but I do like the Perryman side. He's fast. They had the connection last week. The Ravens, old school connection. So I think that the Perryman side is good, but I really like the Herbert side in that game. And then the other game you mentioned,
PJ Walker. We got news.
Yeah,
Bridgewater is
we
out.
just got news. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Bridgewater out. Schefter. PJ Walker will start for Carolina today versus Detroit.
Okay, so Teddy's not going to start. So
Right. So,
that
PJ's what, 4,800 on DraftKings?
he's your Taysom pivot on DraftKings.
Who do you stack him with? Do you stack him with what? Robbie Anderson? I mean, yeah, the usual suspects.
Yeah, if you do, I mean, if it wins someone the Millie Maker, I'll feel bad. But the XFL conversations and whatnot that go with them, I'm not sure I can get there. Even just seeing that at the last minute, I'll go look at some of my lineups after we get off here and see. But I'm not as excited about it. I actually kind of like the Detroit defense now a little bit more with that news. So there's that. You mentioned too, who else was I going to? There's two more guys I want to talk about. One, Alex Smith, who you were on. I mentioned that earlier. I think that and the Burrow side, though, that's a good game to go after. And then the last one I want to mention, it's not a home team bias. If for those of you that follow the other, free podcast we do, the Tourney Takes podcast with Killa B and Kirk Dees, I pretty much hate on Lamar every week. Like I've been off him all season, on him once or twice, but this is definitely a spot that I want to get on him. I think a couple things in this game, and it will segue to running back in a second, but no Brandon Williams or Calais Campbell for the Ravens means to me that Henry can have himself a game and get there. How does Derrick Henry have big games? He rips off 80-yard runs. Again, I'm building a lineup for what if this happens, and that's what I'm looking at. I also like A.J. Brown, which we'll get to later. But if we have that, that speeds up the pace. That gets everything rolling. Now we've got Lamar coming back the other way. They're missing safeties. They're missing Adoree Jackson, who's their fastest cornerback. They've got, we've been waiting for this Hollywood squeaky wheel game. This could be it. We've got a guy at tight end who's probably the most popular that we'll talk about. I didn't check the latest ownership. Yep, he's there, Mark Andrews. So, there's ways you can get different in this game, but I like a Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, Derrick Henry. Just run it that way. And if Lamar starts rushing on them like he did in the playoffs last year, he just destroyed them. It was one of his best games ever with 350 plus passing yards and 140 plus rush yards. Just threw away like 2 or 3 interceptions. Every time they gained 80 yards, he'd throw an interception. So any thoughts on Lamar before we move to running back?
I have some Lamar, but I haven't paired up with Andrews. I didn't want to take up a wide receiver slot. Like Marquise Brown seems like just a Ponzi scheme that just like never ends up paying off. Yes. So yes, you could take a shot. I mean, it's GPP. I mean, that's going to be a low owned type of combination, but I'm not doing it, but I don't blame you if you do. I think another interesting quarterback, he doesn't sound interesting, but on a slate where a lot of people are paying down at quarterback, I'm playing a metric ton of Devontae Adams, and nor do I care about the Colts defense. So playing Aaron Rodgers, paying up at quarterback, like Rodgers, Adams, and then you fill a tight end slot with Tanyan, right? Just to throw someone in. And you could run that back with like Nyheim Hines or Michael Pittman, even T.Y. Hilton if you want. And that's the highest total game on the slate. I mean, we're talking about the game that's a 51.5 total. That, like, who's playing Rivers? Well, I'm not playing Rivers. The problem with the Colts is that they have 3 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends. I mean, like they just have so many people to throw to, but the Packers don't. The Packers, I mean, Lazard is going to be on a snap count, so I'm not big on him. And then that kind of decreases the value of MVS. So like you could play Adams, you could play Jones, you could play Jones as a one-off, but like Rodgers, Adams, like Rodgers could easily, it's in a dome, right? He could throw for 300 yards. And on a slate that may be low scoring, maybe Rodgers plus Adams. Adams has 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's the highest scoring wide receiver on the slate. Why not take his quarterback?
Yeah, I don't hate it. Like you said, there's a ceiling there and no one's on him. So I do like that one. The other guy I like there is just a little bit cheaper, but paying up wise before we move on is Ben Roethlisberger against Jacksonville. I know they're on the road. I know that's typically the thing, but also with no fans this season or typically very little, almost a 29-point team total. We got a couple birthday narratives. We got Juju's birthday today. We got Giovanni Bernard, who's getting the start with mixing out. So there is a couple birthday narratives out there, and that's just another way you could go. Another guy that I'm on. We talked about sort of all the ones we like the most. Let's move to running back and get the, we had the Taysom quick conversation. Let's have the Dalvin Cook conversation because some say 37% is ludicrous. Others say you should be all in because it's just not expensive enough for a guy and the way they use their team. So where are your thoughts on Dalvin Cook?
I think for GPPs, he's like efficiently owned. I think compared to with the scoring, running back scoring is so touchdown dependent that Like Dalvin Cook could put up 26 points and be like, okay, 26 for 9,000, but still be like the best running back by 10 points on the entire slate. So it's not a matter of do you play Cook, but how do you play the lineups that you have Cook in with? Are you playing them with Cooks and Myers and all the chalk? Probably not in GPP. So I think I'm going to be slightly under the field, but I'm pretty much playing one Viking in all of my lineups. So if I don't have Cook in the lineup, I have Thielen or Jefferson. Like it's one of those. So I'm kind of spreading myself out like that. So I mean, he's obviously the top projected play. That's perfectly fine. You play him in cash. You play him in contrarian GPP lineups. But I think the more interesting is all the other running backs on the slate. Like Cook is like the only obvious running back on the slate, and then every other running back has holes. Like every single one. I mean, like my running back pool on this slate is like I got like 15 running backs that I'm cycling through, and I'm playing 100% wide receiver flex. So like I'm not a big fan of playing 3 running backs in GPPs, especially the way that the NFL is going now with their passing more. So I really think that the RB2 spot is the more interesting spot than worrying about Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and you said it too. It's like exactly how I'm doing it. I just looked at my exposures. Currently, I'm at 36%, so I'm underweight slightly. I've used him in lineups that aren't, in cash, you put him in. I've got him in there personally. I think that's the play. So go ahead. If you're not, that's up to you, but I am. So like you said, it's a bit of an interesting position because a lot of the other guys do have holes or do have, like Antonio Gibson's up here, but what about McKissick or how that game script goes? Blage, really? Do you want to go there and try that out? You can. Duke Johnson, the fact that we just talked about, I think Tunsil's out. There's other situations in that game where he might not be as involved. Adrian Peterson, what's the ceiling? You had a great call on him the last time we did this show, but even then, what was it, like a 12 or 13 point week? Like it's like he never goes off, really, and you don't see that. So what are you doing? You said you like the RB2 spot a little bit more, or it's more interesting. What are some of the guys that you're on as far as RB2s and feel a little bit more comfortable with for large field stuff?
Okay, well, I think paying down at running back is perfectly fine. If you want to play AP, he's 4K. If you want to get a little off the beaten path and play carry on the other way around, that's perfectly fine. Either of them could have big games. Mm-hmm. If you want to play McKissick, I think that's a good floor play. I question the ceiling. I'm more likely to play McKissick in stacks where I'm playing Burrow. Like I'm playing a Bengal stack and McKissick is my running back. Same for Nyheim Hines. I think Nyheim Hines is good if you're playing Devontae Adams in the lineup or Aaron Jones, play Nyheim Hines. If you're playing a Rodgers stack, perfectly fine. Gio Bernard, I think makes perfect sense in like Alex Smith plus McLaurin stacks. Okay, that's fine. Duke Johnson makes sense in Cam Newton plus Jacoby Myers stacks. Like guys like Henry, you could play as one-offs. Guys like Salvon Ahmed, whatever, you could play fine. You could do that. The guys that I'm more interested in is the ones that are less likely to be in lineups that have Dalvin Cook in it. So the 6K level running backs. I think playing James Robinson across from a Pittsburgh wide receiver is a great secondary correlation. That you're not playing Ben Roethlisberger, you're not playing Jake Luton, but you're playing Deontay Johnson and Robinson in the running back spot. Chris Thompson's out. It's most likely that James Robinson's essentially going to be on the field nearly every snap. I know it's the worst matchup in the NFL, but how do I argue with someone that's going to be on the field nearly 100% of the time and dumping off? And, if he gets 80 yards, I mean, if he gets in the end zone, he's great. Then we also have what I'm playing the most of in that range, and that's James Conner, the other side of the game. People have this notion that they just go by the past 2 games. The game before the last one, they were down to the Cowboys. So that took James Conner off the field. The last game, they just passed a ton. But Conner had 90% of the share of the running back work. I mean, they didn't run the ball that much. But it's not like he didn't get stats because they were giving it to Benny Snell. It's just that they were passing the ball more. And I'm going to go based on that Jacksonville has awful defense and the Steelers are a 10-plus point favorite. James Conner has one of the highest rushing props and the second highest touchdown prop on the board, -162. The only one higher is Cook. So if Conner's going to come in at single-digit ownership underneath the Pittsburgh wide receivers, And in that range, more people will play, a Cook lineup with like a 5K running back with Duke Johnson, those types of lineups. I think playing Connor is a one-off and just betting on the fact that maybe this is the game that they just decide to feed James Conner, give him 22 carries, and he breaks off one and he goes 22 for 135 with 2 touchdowns, and he's sitting there and everyone's looking going, yeah, the Steelers had the highest implied total and they were the biggest favorite. What's the long-term correlation of that? Running back fantasy points. The higher the spread, the higher the total correlates to higher fantasy points for the running back. I'm just relying on that and hoping in those lineups that, they're not, the Big Ben's not passing the ball 45 times.
Yeah, and the other thing about that correlation, we remember back, this is old school DFS before, the game evolved. It was even better if they were at home, right? But like I said earlier, first of all, even if it was a home game for Jacksonville, it's not really a home game, so it'd be good for that. But second of all, like we said, not a lot of fans or anything like that. So I think it's almost going to feel like a home game for those guys, up as, a 10-point plus favorite, 29-point almost total for their team. I definitely could see that. And I also don't mind a mini stack using him and Conley on the other side, who's super cheap. The idea that you're paying less than 10K, 9.6K for a little secondary stack where he does all the work, scores a couple touchdowns, at least one, hopefully on those Vegas odds. And then Conley has to do work. He's got 8 targets the last couple weeks combined, back-to-back weeks. So I don't mind something like that to go back and forth. I think others in the chat like Zeke here. I like Zeke here. We talked about it on the Tourney Takes pod. I think he's an interesting way to go the opposite side of that game. I'm not using him Dalvin Cook for me, just the cost is so high for both of them. And, for it to be a back and forth, it would be probably a slower game, you'd think. So I'm going with Zeke, but it'll be in sort of those passing lineups with Minnesota or like one pass catcher on the other side. Anybody else here? I mentioned Henry earlier, who I like. I think Aaron Jones is interesting for tournaments. And then the guy I really like, and I'll get your take after this, but Miles Sanders. The thing about Cleveland is with Myles Garrett out, the running backs have just crushed against them, averaging so much more yards per game, yards per carry, sorry. So you've got to factor that in. And then Miles Sanders is sort of the one piece I feel safer about as far as Philadelphia goes, right? It's tough when you've got Rager and Goddard, who's going to be, have some ownership there. And pretty much everybody on that side, you could see something out of them. Fulgham, but I like Sanders the most in that game. And then I guess a little bit of Mike Davis there. I don't know what your thoughts are on him with PJ Walker at the helm, but maybe they check down more. Who knows? So any other of those guys in that range there, Blender?
Well, I mean, I don't mind Mike Davis. I have a little. Okay, I get it. That's perfectly fine. The problem with Sanders is not that I don't like Miles Sanders. It's that he's in a range where I'm playing Zeke, I'm playing Connor, and I have to think to myself, do I want to give up more Connor and Zeke shares or James Robinson shares to get Miles Sanders in? I'm not playing much of that game. That's not one of my flag plant type of games. I'm not playing anyone on the Cleveland side. I'm not playing that. I'm not playing much of that game. So I can't make correlations or nothing in that. So like, it's much better for me for my lineups that game just fails in total. So if I believe if I need that game to fail in total, that means I can't really roster anyone, especially when, like I'm trying to get James Conner and I'm trying to get James Robinson and Ezekiel Elliott lineups. So like, if you want to play Miles Sanders, that's fine. If that's your flag plant game, go for it. Play all of that game. Play Landry, play Chubb, play Goddard, play whoever you want from that game. It's not the game that I chose. The last running back I want to touch on is Antonio Gibson. I'm going to be way under on Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson is figured to be double-digit owned. All his scoring is touchdown variance. Like if he's on the field only like 35% of the time. They don't give him third down work, but he's there at the goal. He gets high value touches. I agree. He's there inside the 10. I absolutely agree. But like that doesn't mean you got to
use him in a certain way, though. I think you just said it exactly. You got to play for that script. If you're going to use Antonio Gibson, I like him a lot more with the Washington football defense and the idea of saying that, the Burrow can get a little bit tricky under pressure and they can get to him, and then that could open it up and lead to some short field scoring opportunities or things like that where they do get out ahead and start running the ball. That would be one where I would like the running back and DST correlation. Salvin Ahmed would be another guy I wouldn't mind with Miami, but we'll get there. Anything else before we talk.
Right. I just wanted to highlight the Gibson thing because it's like if he doesn't get a touchdown, he busts. Like he's not going to be on the field often enough. Yeah. I guess if he does a Ronald Jones and breaks a 98-yard touchdown, sure, yes, I guess so. But I mean, if you look at his scoring over the past this entire season, like he has out of all the running backs, he has like the highest percent of his overall score being touchdowns. And I mean, it's very similar to Derrick Henry. I mean, it's the same type of thing that Derrick Henry at 8K, if he doesn't get any touchdowns, you ain't winning. So that's the only thing I wanted to highlight with that. And I think he's going to be over.
Yeah, and you talk about this a lot, but it comes down to, not necessarily the players, but the construction. If you've got Gibson and Washington football team together, I think that's a fine play. If it busts, the lineup was garbage anyway, so move on. But at least you built it accordingly. Like it's in the game. If the Lamar, Brown, Henry stack doesn't end up working, and like you said, Henry busts, then it's probably wasn't going to get there anyway for Lamar and Hollywood to reach their ceiling. It just has to go that way. So you got to know some of these lineups are going down the drain at some point anyway. One thing I want to highlight, because you'll see it in the expert survey back and forth. I was really liking Damian Harris coming into the week. Then there was news that Michelle was activated. Now there's news that he's inactive. So they're not going to roll him out either way. So he's going to be out. So I'm going back to my take here. I do like Harris. I've talked about it in the past. I talked about it in the expert survey. It's a one-off for me. It's a way to get a little bit different in that game with a lot of people on Jacoby Myers. Belichick does like to go to the hot hand. Harris has been doing it for them. I think he at least gets a chance. Houston is a defense we've been going up against all season with running backs. If you remember back to even the first game of the season, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rookie of the Year takes right at the Thursday Night Football game because he destroyed them right away. And, that hasn't ever played out. But the point is this matchup has been good. So any thoughts on it's always impossible to pick a New England running back. Obviously, Burkhead, James White, etc. still there. But I don't mind it. And then Cam, you always have to face off against as well. But I think for large field stuff, it's a good way to go at 5% or less.
No, I think Harris is fine, but just my strategy today, that's not one of the games that I'm flag planting. So like I have to bet on that game failing. So I'm not playing him.
No, for sure. And I think, like I said, just for me, I think about the cash games. We just talked about it earlier, but you've got Duke Johnson, Jacoby Myers, pretty obvious secondary stack. I think a lot of people are going with that. I'm just flipping it. I'm just going Damian Harris and Crooks and hoping that it goes that way instead. I think that's a fine strategy and a good way to go about it as far as the secondary is concerned. Talk to me about this next range, though, Blender. We've got Blage, Bernard. We already talked about Duke enough. And then there's Hines, McKissick. You can just play off of the Gibson conversation. But I think Blage is the most interesting one here at almost 18%. He's even higher owned or showing higher ownership than Duke Johnson. What do you do with him, or where are you at with him this week as far as being on that game in general? You said you were on it. So
right, I think he's fine. I mean, I have a bunch of them because I'm on that game. I'm playing Blage in reverse jet stacks or by a one-off. And like it's the type of thing that I'm not thrilled to playing Kalen Blage at 5,600, but if I'm betting on that game, I'm playing a bunch of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Hunter Henry. I mean, like that's my strategy this week. So like to me, it's just he's the Chargers running back that's most likely to see the most touches. I'm gonna. That's why I have Gio Bernard. Like I'm not thrilled about playing Gio Bernard either. But like I don't want to have 20% of my lineups be Bengals, Washington stacks, and then have Bernard rush the ball in twice. And I'm sitting there going, like, I picked the right game, but the wrong players. Like, no, I'm just going to take all the players.
Yeah. Don't forget about Guyton over there for the Chargers. You got to get some Guyton in there. He's been getting some extra work as well. So I don't mind those stacks that you just talked about there. I think I like Bernard the most in this range. For me, I'm using McKissick, like you said, accordingly. The idea is, like I just said with Gibson, I'm using Gibson. I like him with the football team defense because I think that's how that works out for him. If I think it's going to go back and forth like you do and I do for the most of my lineups, that's why I've got McKissick in there, is because I think, like you said, he gets the third down work. There's the back and forth. There's the, 29 targets over the last two games. And that's the two games that Alex Smith played. And guess who's still behind the helm? It's Alex Smith. So I like that. And then our boy, your boy, everyone's boy at RG, but Eric Beimfor, I love the podcast you guys do every week. If you guys haven't checked that out, I've touted it before. It's free, so go check it out. It's a great podcast, a good back and forth, and it's long. I like a little bit. Everyone makes an hour podcast and thinks you have to. I like it, but on something like that, when the theory comes into play and all these back and forth conversations, I like the longer podcast. Brett made a joke in the chat. Killa B, my guy, he said it's fun listening to Blender on 2X. Yeah, it's a good experiment, but I talk pretty fast too, so I'm sure it'll. It's this one would be tough to go at that, but Salvin Ahmed He's on him. This is a late active last week where we got the situation with Jordan Howard out. The sharper late swappers and whatnot got onto this, and now he's back again. And 4.8K, only a slight bump. So what's your thoughts on Salvon Ahmed here for Miami?
I think he's fine. I mean, I think he's just as fine as like Adrian Peterson or any of those guys. I think, to me, that's the worst game environment. Like that's the game that I have like literal like that and Philadelphia Cleveland. See, like Philadelphia Cleveland could turn into a shootout, I think. But I just think with Drew Lock and Tua, I think these teams I think this game is going to be really slow. So like I think I have him in like 3 lineups or something. Ahmed, because he fit 4,800 running back, he fits in certain spots. He's paired up with the Dolphins defense. Okay, I get that. If you wanted to play him, great. I think Duke Johnson projects better. AP projects better. McKissick projects better. So like, if you want to play, like if that was your flag plant game, then play a ton of them. I think he's perfectly fine. But I mean, we only have like a 2-game sample size on him, and it doesn't seem like he catches that many balls out of the backfield. Breida should be active, but I mean, I don't think he's going to be. I think they're probably going to hand it off to Ahmed anyway. So like I know it's not a hot take or anything, but I mean he's fine. Like I don't call you crazy for playing him, but I'm not excited to.
You love the vomit stacks. I've got a vomit triple stack. I'm gonna go Ahmed, Jakeem Grant, and the D, and I'm gonna triple dip that thing with Miami against Denver this week against Drew Lock, who we didn't even know if he was gonna play till yesterday. So I'm gonna run that 3 ways on that game and try and get lucky in the $20 Millie Maker, not the bigger stuff, but I don't mind something like that. You mentioned LaMichael P. Ryan. I think he's fine, especially in that game environment when you're stacking that up back and forth. I do like that. You mentioned AP versus Kerryon Johnson. It's almost to me like the McKissick Gibson thing. Build accordingly. And then last, back to Ahmed, just one thing quick, and we'll segue over to wide receiver with this, is I also don't mind, like I said, I don't love that game environment, but if you wanted to run something like Ahmed and KJ Hamler, that's an extremely cheap secondary stack of, if you're going to get just 2 pieces in that game, that could actually exceed and have a little bit of a ceiling, I think, just based on how that game could go. So let's go over to wide receiver, get your thoughts here. A lot of it will tie into your quarterbacks, but maybe, off just the 3 games that you're on, you can talk about it a little bit with the chalk. You've got Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Cooks, etc. And then just, building, and you do a good job of this, right? Looking for leverage, looking for ways to be different and unique. Go through that a little bit for me here and for everybody that's watching.
Okay, well, I have a metric ton of Devontae Adams. I think he's clearly by far the highest ceiling wide receiver on the slate. I mean, yes, he's expensive also, and he's less likely to be in lineups with Dalvin Cook. So if you could build stacks that have both of them in it, I think that's a more contrarian lineup construction. Mm-hmm. I also think that stacking 2 wide, a lot of times I don't like stacking 2 wide receivers in a stack because it fills up spots, but I'm playing 4 wide receivers, so I don't mind it as much this week since I'm flag planting on games. And most people won't play Thielen and Jefferson together, but they're 6,000 and 6,300. If this turns into a shootout, there's no reason why you can't play Kirk Cousins with both of them. Right? Jefferson could get 140 yards and no touchdowns on 9 catches, and Thielen could get 3 touchdowns on 6 catches and 50 yards, and you're gold at those prices. So I'm not limiting groups of keeping out Thielen and Jeff. Obviously, I'm only playing them with Cousins together. Right. But on the other side of that game, I think people are going to be attracted to Amari Cooper as the run back, but I actually have more CeeDee Lamb than Amari Cooper because it's $400 difference, and they project close enough. And I even looked at Scores and Odds, which is a better collective site. So you go to scoresandodds.com. You could take a look at the props. CeeDee Lamb has a 3-yard higher prop than Amari Cooper. Does that necessarily mean anything? Probably not. But I mean, it's at least something there of they're closer than you think. I think Amari Cooper is going to come in at 8% owned, and CeeDee Lamb's going to be sitting there 1-2% owned. People are more likely to go to Gallup at 3,700, seeing that he's so much cheaper. But Gallup doesn't project as well. So I have way too much CeeDee Lamb because it's leverage on that game as well as on the popular. So I have more Thielen and CeeDee Lamb than I do Jefferson or Cooper, but I still have a ton of them. I mean, like that game is in like a third of my lineups. So I'm making a whole ton of combinations. And then the same thing could be said with the Bengals. With the Burrow stacks, Higgins is going to be probably twice as owned as Tyler Boyd. So why I'm playing more Tyler Boyd than I am T. Higgins? You could say the same about the Jets. Like Denzel Mims is going to get some ownership. He'll probably be as a cheap wide receiver, maybe 7% owned, something around there. Who the hell is playing Jamison Crowder at 6,100 on this slate? With seeing all those receivers in that range, if I'm that's one of my flag playing games. So I'm playing a ton. Jamison Crowder's going to come in at like 2% owned, and we've seen games this year where Jamison Crowder has 11 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown, and he ends up on a Millie Maker winning lineup, and no one's playing him today on a slate where you can't even identify what the best game environments are. So why can't it be the Jets-Chargers game?
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, and everything you said. I do like the conversation around Thielen and Jefferson. I like Jefferson more if you're picking one. I think Thielen's still a fine play, and like you said, the cost, you can actually stack them up. That is the other thing about that Minnesota offense is such a tight target tree that's who's getting the ball. Like, we got, tight ends there, and that's always a challenge. But other than that, it's not much. And if you're not playing Cook, that's the whole idea. Like you said, you're just going off of that spot. I was with you earlier. I like the Dallas side a little bit more. I think both Cooper and Lamb together, and then using I don't know, Jefferson then seems like the most popular. So I would probably, flip to Thielen if it was my one-off there in that 3-1 stack. But, that to me is fine. You mentioned some stuff earlier, like Michael Thomas with Taysom Hill. I think that would be pretty unique. Just I don't think a lot of people are stacking it up, even though he's going to be owned. But it doesn't seem like as many are going there, even though the ownership will show it a little bit. But I don't see that as much. Did you have a side on Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones? Any thoughts from hearing conversations along the week, or just anything on those two in general?
I have none of that game. I think that's the only game on the slate that I have zero players from. I'm betting on the fact that Taysom Hill at quarterback makes that game just be a slog, nothing fest. So like if it turns out to be a shootout, then I'm dead. But I'm betting on the fact that I look at the ownership on Kamara, Thomas. I mean, they're not high owned or anything. It's just that I don't know how they pay off those salaries often enough on this type of slate that I want to play them. And if I'm not going to play them, then how am I playing Julio Jones at 7,500? How am I playing Calvin Ridley at 7,000? If I'm betting on that game to fail, then Julio doesn't get 30 points. Ridley doesn't get 30 points. Like if you're betting on that game, I think if you're going to play Taysom Hill in the lineup, I think you're playing one of Jones or Ridley. I think they're going to be owned low enough that you don't have to make if you like Julio more, then just play Julio. I think it's not going to matter. Ridley's going to come in less owned because he's coming off of injury. So like the quote leverage play, but you're not leveraging off of anything. Like Julio is not going to be owned enough that how much leverage
it's 8 or 12% between them. So you're just playing
right. You're not you're gaining leverage over about 8% of the lineups versus like if you fade Dalvin Cook, you're gaining leverage over 40% of lineups. So when you play Thielen instead of Cook, and Thielen goes off and Cook fails, like you gain so many points there. So like Julio projects better than Ridley, but I mean, I'm more likely to just play them. If you're playing Saints, then you play them. But if you're not playing Saints, like I just don't see how the Falcons get there. Yeah. Like in this type of game, I just don't see it.
Yeah, use them in the stacks accordingly.
Putting up 300 yards. I mean, I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, and you can go, that's another, again, because of his price and the interesting scenario of this week, if you want to do that, you could go Taysom Hill with Julio, and that's that, and just play it.
And that's it, right, exactly. Yeah. Like, you don't have to play a wide receiver. Like, you could play Taysom naked, and your run back is Julio or Ridley. I think that's perfectly fine. But as a one-off, like how does Taysom not get there? In a game where Julio has 11 catches for 130, if they have to throw the ball that much, that means the Saints, Taysom's running, the RPO or whatever, and running 3 touchdowns and at 4,800, he's going to be the highest scoring quarterback.
Throw in a cash question right quick for you, Blender. Someone threw it. If I see a good one, I normally toss it. Devontae Adams and Goddard, or Keenan Allen and Mark Andrews?
I mean, that's close. It really depends on your construction. I mean, Truthfully, in my lineup, I have one of each side. I have Adams and Andrews in my lineup.
I've got
But I mean-
Allen and Andrews. That's my side.
Oh, you have that side?
I had Adams and Goddard, so I'm guessing it's going to be a similar lineup. But I actually swapped because it allowed me to change my defense and get it a little bit better. Which I don't care about defense, but it was just I don't mind the difference between Keenan Allen and Adams as is, and then Mark Andrews is whatever. Goddard. The only thing that worries me is that there's just so many guys there versus, like I said, with safeties and cornerbacks and everybody out for Baltimore. I do think that they're going to have a good game, and I think that just leans to Andrews. And I don't really want to play Andrews in my GPPs much, so I don't mind.
You have to know that if I'm playing Adams and Andrews out of that combination, that you have to know who's in my RB2 slot.
Well, I'm guessing you've got a lot of Peterson.
Well, that's the only way you could do it. That's why when I looked at that 2v2, I'm like, that's someone that's not playing AP and cash.
Yeah,
that's someone that's playing Duke Johnson, and I don't know who your third running back's going to be if you're even playing a third running back.
Probably Duke and Blage is my guess.
That's what you do. Okay, which is fine.
Yeah.
To me, I know we're a little off the beaten path or whatever, but for cash games, like I just don't see what's the difference in floor between Blage and Peterson that you're paying $1,600 for.
Yeah, that's what you got to decide.
That's
right?
You may think it has. Okay, that's fine. We could disagree on if you think it's enough of a floor that you're willing to pay $1,600 more for. I'm viewing it, looking at my projections, that Blage isn't a dramatically enough better play than a 4K Lions running back with even if he gets 50% of the rushing share, he's like Mike Davis. I mean, it's not as good of a value as Mike Davis last week. But I just look at that and go, if he gives me 6 to 8 points, like how does a 4K guy fail like that? So Blage could getting 8 points at the same price, like then it fails.
Yeah, I had a back and forth with a buddy on it as well, and the same thing just came up with Blage. Is the Holmes team, the opportunity, the fact that coach speak, they like him. He's big, he's got size, he can catch passes, he can do all this different stuff. With AP, I just feel like one, there's a higher chance of Kerryon Johnson getting in the game, and two, I just never see, and not that you need a ceiling in cash. I'm just saying his floor hasn't even been that good recently from what we've seen. And then his ceiling has been like 12 or 13. So I don't know. It's a good conversation to take offline. I think that, some people asked about 4 wide receivers in cash. Absolutely. You could do it this week because we're debating Adrian Peterson and Blage as the third man in. There's definitely opportunity if you want to use somebody in there. And I think it'll lean to some of these value guys. So we'll get back on track here, but we've had the conversation about Myers, Lamb. We don't need to go there again. Dropping down to more of this 4.5K and down. I know you're using guys with your 3 games there. A couple that came up though. Marvin Hall, 3.8K with basically nobody there this week for them. So I think he's viable. Any thoughts on him? And then KJ Hamler I brought up. Jalen Guyton I brought up. I think that game environment is just so good, and he's actually been getting similar workload to Mike Williams, but it just costs way less and has like 0 ownership. So I think he's very interesting. Jakeem Grant. I don't know. Who else do you want to talk about down here? Conley, I mentioned. Anybody cheap guys before we get to tight end?
I think if you're playing the chalky Texans Patriots game, I think Randall Cobb is that's leverage. You could play the same game environment. Cooks is going to be like 20% owned. Fuller's probably going to be double digits, 10, 12. Duke Johnson is going to be double digits. And Randall Cobb's sitting there at like, what, 2% owned? Nothing? 1% owned?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, he's not exciting or anything. He's 3,600 though. And any touchdown and catch that he has takes away from all of those players. So combine all the ownership for Duke Johnson, Will Fuller, and Brandon Cooks. Anytime Cal catches the ball, you get points, and all of those lineups don't.
And Jacoby Myers, too. Mix them all in. They're all
right. Mix them all in. So, like, the only reason why I don't have that much of like that range is because obviously since I'm stacking like flag planting on 3 games, like I have a lot of Denzel Mims because he's 3,300 in that range, and he fits along with I don't need a second guy. I don't need I don't have any Hamler. It's not because I don't like Hamler. It's because I'm just not betting on that game environment. So if you're playing Hamler, I think Hamler in that range, perfectly fine. I think that's great. Marvin Hall, perfectly fine. But I'm barely playing anyone from the Lions-Panthers game. Like this PJ Walker news comes in, it doesn't even affect me because I wasn't planning on stacking that game to begin with. So I have 3 lineups with Marvin Hall as a one-off. I think I have 2 Matt Stafford stacks because they happen to fit together. I had a high enough median that I could make a lineup like that. But it really comes down. I still think the overall point is, what game environments are you betting on? Play those types of lineups. And if there are cheap receivers like that, play them.
Perfect. Okay, guys, throw your questions into the chat now, because tight end is a bit of a wasteland. I mean, I'll summarize some of it. I'll give it over to Blender. But, Mark Andrews, for me, I said in cash. I think he's just so high owned. You can use them however you want, but I like using them in cash and then going against the grain in large field stuff. I just think there's too many other guys that can get there, and I don't think he's like primed for a big 3-touchdown game or something where he's just going to blow up the slate. Dallas Goedert, I like in tournaments. I know he's still got some ownership going with them, but we did bury the lead a little bit. There's supposedly a little bit of weather in that game. I forgot to mention that off the top, but I don't know if it's enough to care. And then at the same time, Goedert is not going to be affected by that. He's going to be affected by other guys eating his lunch, if that's the case, the Sanders, the Ragers, the Fulghams, etc. But I like him at 3.8K. I think he's fine and one of the better values for sure. Hawkinson with nobody there. This is just all the chalk guys at the top. Anybody that you really want to talk about here, though, Blender, besides the office at the top, or any more thoughts? Will they chuck questions in?
Well, I think if you're stacking a game, play the tight end. So like, and tight end, there's going to be so much hot variance in tight end. Don't feel the need to play a chalky guy. I have a bunch of Hunter Henry, but I'm also playing a ton of Chargers. That gets it. Like Robert Tonyan is leverage off of Devontae Adams. So I have Tonyan in a bunch of lineups. I have Dalton Schultz, obviously, because I'm playing the Cowboys. I think Logan Thomas will be somewhat popular. He's perfectly fine, but I'm playing that game. How about Eric Ebron? People are going to play those Pittsburgh wide receivers. Ebron touchdown is completely negatively correlated to them. So, like, to me, tight end isn't a priority. Like, Andrew stands out as, like, he's the highest ceiling tight end for the context of this slate, and he can get there without Lamar getting there. So you don't have to worry about necessarily stacking him. But, I mean, to me, it's a whoever fits. Like defense and tight end this week. Defense is normally whoever fits.
I was just going to say that. It was you took the words of my mouth. It's basically like defense to me this week is where I just scramble them up. I normally do like a max of 15% on defense because I just let it go and see what I get in there. And then if there is some correlation spots, then so be it. They work out, but I don't aim for that anymore. And then the same thing is with tight end this week. It's make them fit your build and your stacks and get them in there, whether it's the third man in, the second guy in to leverage up like the Pittsburgh one you just mentioned and get off those receivers, mix Ebron in with those receivers for your 3-1s. And then also, the situation of like I always talk about with secondary stacks, Blender mentions them as well. I'll look for those too. Sure. If there's some of those in there, I wouldn't hate like a Goddard, Rashard Higgins. It's up to you. If you're on that game environment, like you said, he's not, but I'm just using an example. So anyways, let's get to these questions here. Brett asked about the Wash Cincy game and you're on this being so popular. But then also those defenses are like the most popular. Not that we talk about a bunch of defense on here, but, I'm personally avoiding them in my stacks. I know that it could go back and forth, the old Jameis Winston situation where you could play the defense against him. But any thoughts on those defenses versus those stacks and then using them together?
Well, typically I don't do that. I mean, typically if I'm playing a defense from that game, it's in a lineup that doesn't have any of those players. Yeah. But I mean, I'm less likely to play a high-priced wide receiver with his own defense, because defenses typically get there for ceiling on pick sixes, on touchdowns, and the touchdown for the defense takes away offensive plays from the offense. Now, if I have a low price guy, like he could get to 15 points, 16, 18 points, on less plays. But like if I'm playing Julio Jones, I'm not playing Julio Jones with the Falcons defense. Like the likelihood of that, the Falcons pick six and then Julio can get there missing a series. Yeah. So, like, I'm more likely, doesn't mean you don't do it. I'm just saying I'm more likely to not play the defense that has, like, high-priced receivers. Obviously, running backs, you can. So, like, to me, that's the only consideration. Other than that, whatever defense fits. Like, I sometimes I don't even pay attention to who's in there. As long as it doesn't fit the rules that I have, like, the defense is the defense. If I'm paying up for the Steelers in a certain lineup, then so be it. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. We'll rapid fire some of these off. Got about 5 minutes left and we'll get out of here. Newton and Mike Davis or Lamar and Gio in Yahoo Cash.
Jesus. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I barely know the prices on Yahoo.
I like Lamar and Gio if I had to pick. Yeah, exactly. Prices
matter. I'm just being honest. I don't want to give you advice without I'm not playing on Yahoo today. So I wouldn't. You shouldn't take my advice on who.
I just like. Yeah, I'm the same way. I just like those players so much more that's just, to me, that would be it. And clearly they're the same cost if it's a 2v2 or very close. FanDuel cash: Scary Terry, James Conner, or Devontae Adams and Kerryon Johnson.
Kerryon Johnson. Why you playing Kerryon Johnson on FanDuel?
Yeah,
if anything, you play AP on FanDuel, right? I mean, because Kerryon is more likely to get passes out of the backfield. So yeah, no, I would not play Kerryon Johnson in cash on FanDuel at all.
Yeah, if that's your build, I'd be Terry and James Conner. So, go with that. If you can get Peterson with Devontae, sure, that's a good one. Why don't people like Kamara this week? Seems even better without Drew.
No, if anything, his touchdown equity goes so dramatically down. If Taysom Hill's going to be on the goal line, we play these showdown contests, right? With these Saints, you play Kamara, and next thing you know, Latavius Murray's in. Or Taysom Hill is now. But now Taysom Hill gets to troll you on every play. Imagine doing that to yourself, paying that price for Kamara. Yes, he's going to be low owned because of it, but I think he's low owned. I think he's low owned for a reason. Yes, he could catch a bunch of passes out of the backfield. I get it. His floor is still intact. But he's 9,000. He's 9,200. He's expensive as hell. He's going to need like 2 touchdowns to get you a ceiling GPP relevant type of result. And with Taysom Hill at quarterback, that's like having Cam Newton at quarterback on the goal line. It's like
Taysom Hill chalk. This is the reverse troll situation though, where everyone's going to be needing Taysom and thinking he's going to run this in when they get to the 1, and it's going to be Kamara 3 times, and people are going to be tilting. It's going to be great when that happens. I'm not super high on Kamara. We did talk about him a little bit this week, but yes, realistically, like you said, when you've got a guy like Cook right there, it makes it pretty easy to save the $200, not to just to save the money, but the point of who's going to get more likely work and have more upside is probably Cook. Kamara is interesting for that reason, and it would just be for the troll factor. Who else here? Noah Fant or Dalton Schultz? I like Schultz.
Well, Fant is obviously going to project higher. I mean, Noah Fant's a better receiver. So yeah, like if you have a choice between the two, you play Noah Fant.
But if you can play Dalton to Dalton, you play Dalton.
Oh,
so
yes. So you play Dalton to Dalton, of course.
Double Dalton stacks, you have to do it. So
see, look, I'm a ginger. I have red hair. Most people, I wear a hat.
Oh, baby, it's gonna be Andy Dalton
I'm 41. I'm losing my hair or whatever, but I'm a redhead, so I'm going with the red rifle today.
Some would say losing your mind. You're talking about losing your hair. I think we're okay here, though. So we'll get the Andy Dalton stacks. I like it. Going with that one. What else do we got? Mike Davis or James Conner? You said Conner. I wrote that down as we went along. I like that take. I got a little bit of time left before we go live, for the lineups lock. So I'm going to get in there and get some of those in. Who else here? Thank you. Thoughts on Kumaro, Salvin Ahmed. We talked about Dalvin in your flex. Yeah. Brett always has this one. Make sure you get Dalvin in your flex. Thanks, tips. We'll do that. If you're using Lineup HQ, I should note that's going to do it automatically for you. So you can do that. Connor Blage, GPP DK. We talked about that. So I'm going to skip that, see if there's any more. Okay, you're on Gallup over Hamler, obviously, because you're playing that game.
Right, but I mean, I think Hamler's fine. It's not, to me, it's not a difference of Gallup or Hamler. It's a fact of I'm playing Cowboys Vikings and I'm not playing Miami Denver.
Perfectly fine. It makes perfect sense. Exactly. Like you said, that's the key. Why it's not just about the plays. It's how's your lineup going and what's it built like. That's a way to get after it. So I love that. Guys, I think that's it. There's 10 seconds left here. We're going to get out of here. I do appreciate it, Blender. Always fun hopping on with you, man. Even though you bury my dad jokes right to the ground, I'll accept that this time. I'll work on it for next time, man. But I appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for watching and supporting. You can find me on Twitter at @ToeTagAndTambo. Hit me up there if you have any other questions or in the Discord. Other than that, thank you and good luck.
Fantasy Football, a special happy hour edition for week 11. You want to fit Dalvin Cook in those lineups? We've got some of my favorite mid-range and value plays. Nobody over 7K on DraftKings, including my favorite play of the week. Who is it? Belly up to the fantasy bar and find out. Welcome in, guys. Week 11 edition, Beers Daily Fantasy 6-pack this season. Cruising right along, but good to be back here once again, providing 6 of my favorite plays across both FanDuel and DraftKings for Week 11. Before we get into the plays, guys, do me a favor. Take a second. Click that thumbs up button on YouTube. I greatly appreciate it. Really helps us out. As I always say, that's the tip jar here in the Fantasy Bar. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, get notified when these videos are coming out. So like I said in the open, we're going to do a little bit of a happy hour. What does that mean? If you're new around here, that means we're going to slash prices just like your favorite bar down the road and give you some of my favorite guys. Nobody over 7K on DraftKings, nobody over 8K on FanDuel, including the Beast of the Week. Try to make room for Dalvin Cook in those lineups for you guys. Now, before we get into Week 11, let's take a quick look back at Week 10. Obviously, disappointing performance from Michael Thomas. Expecting more. That price got me on DraftKings, and that windy game in Cleveland was no help to Austin Hooper. Just a bunch of guys that did not help you win tournaments. So let's turn the page here, talk some Week 11. Let's start with wide receiver. We're going to go with Amari Cooper of the Cowboys. So we talked Dalvin Cook, going to be obviously the highest owned player on this slate with good reason. The guy has been a stud. This is a great matchup. But what about the other side? Minnesota scoring a bunch of points. Dallas is going to have to do something here. And I love this spot for the passing game. They get Andy Dalton back. Nothing to be too excited about, but the point is it's going to be better than the Ben DiNucci's of the world. Guys, they've been rolling out at quarterback, Garrett Gilbert. So Dalton back in there. This price on Amari Cooper, very fair. In fact, cheapest price we've gotten on him on DraftKings this season in quite some time. Actually, looking back, it's been a while since we've got 5,400 Amari Cooper. And with Dallas playing from behind, like we said, they're going to have to throw the ball. 7-point road dogs here in Minnesota. And the Vikings have struggled with the wide receiver position. 4th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. I know they have a plethora of options there in Dallas, but Amari Cooper, the top dog and the guy I want here in Week 11 against the Vikings. All right, let's go to the running back position. A guy I never thought would be in the 6-pack, but here we are in 2020. We're rolling Calen Blage of the Chargers. Now, I've had some disparaging things to say about Calen Blage over the years, but it's really hard to argue with what we've seen over the past 2 weeks. And I know, short sample, small sample, police, come on after me. 20 touches per week here over the last 2 games for Calen Blage. Coach comes out and says, we want to get this guy even more involved. Find ways to get him the ball. He's getting the ball through the air, on the ground. The Chargers, big home favorites here. 2nd highest projected total on this slate this week against the Jets. And the Jets, we know, worse against the pass, no doubt. You're going to see a lot of Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, all those guys projected to have a lot of ownership. And Blage will certainly have some as well. But the Jets, not very good against running backs either. Bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed here. Got to put our biases aside here. He's away from Adam Gase. Maybe that's the key to free him here. Calen Blage in a great spot and tremendous prices is a big home favorite here against the New York Jets. All right, let's go to tight end. It's been a dumpster fire every single week this season. We have no stud Kelsey's, Kittles on this slate. Let's save some money with Logan Thomas of Washington. So matchup is what this one's all about. Cincinnati has really struggled with the tight end position. In fact, 2nd most fantasy points allowed to tight ends this season. We know Washington dealing with a very thin target tree. We know McLaurin will get some targets. J.D. McKissic going to get about 28 targets per week, but that still leaves some targets for Logan Thomas. And in fact, the Bengals, we know, bad against the tight end, and of course, bad against the pass as well. 29th in DVOA against the pass this season. I think we could get a sneaky shootout in this game, but let's save some money here. Logan Thomas cheap, going to give us some targets, and I think he finds the end zone here against this terrible Cincinnati defense. All right, moving on. Pick number 4. Let's go to the quarterback position and roll with Big Ben Roethlisberger of the Steelers. So Ben been a model of consistency this season. Multiple touchdown passes in 8 of the 9 games this season. This matchup about as good as it gets here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have established they really want to throw the ball. We saw it last week in that windy game. They were still throwing the ball around. Even when leading big, it was pass first here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I don't mind going to James Conner. I think he'll be a lower owned option at the running back position, but Big Ben's the guy I really want here. Jacksonville, bottom 3 in almost anything we want to look at against the pass. DVOA, fantasy points allowed. We could go on and on and on here with how bad this Jacksonville defense has been. And the Steelers' highest projected team total on this week's slate. And we know that correlates very well with quarterback success, but Steelers projected for 4+ touchdowns. I got to think Ben's involved in at least 2 of those, hopefully 3 or more. But I love the spot for Big Ben against Jacksonville. All right, moving along. Let's stay right there with Pittsburgh. We like Big Ben. The question is always, what Steelers receiver do we target here? I think he can go on any of them, but we're going to target the cheapest of the 3, and that's Diontae Johnson. So this guy just continues to get targets, and they all do. You look across the board, they get double-digit targets for all 3 of these guys. So this is definitely a spot where you can target any of them, but give me the cheaper. Like I said, Diontae Johnson, the cheapest of the 3 on DraftKings. FanDuel, he's tied with Claypool. The point is, when this guy's been in the lineup, he has put up numbers. He gets target. Now it says 10+ targets in 5 of his 8 games. It's really about 5 in 6.5 games. Some of those games he was injured. So when he's healthy and he's out there, to me, he's the alpha of this receiving group. As good as Juju's been lately, as big a games as we've seen from Chase Claypool, I think Diontae Johnson, the best receiver. Now, I don't want to disparage those guys. In fact, I think this is a great spot to double stack. I didn't want to pile up a bunch of Steelers here in the 6-pack. We already mentioned Connor as a nice pivot at the running back position, Ben and Diontae, but I also love Juju and Claypool here. Are going to have a ton of double stacks, but if I have to pick one, the guy I think that outperforms the other, it's Diontae Johnson this week here against Jacksonville. All right, it's time to take a look at my favorite play for week 11, but before we do that, guys, we're going to continue to say thank you, the great audience here at the Fantasy Bar. We're going to continue our Beast of the Week contest, absolutely free to play. All you got to do is get in the comment section, make sure you click that thumbs up button. All you got to do is guess fantasy points for my Beast of the Week on DraftKings. Closest guess is going to win themselves either a free week of Rotogrinders Premium, includes everything we have, including Lineup HQ, building a ton of lineups or one lineup in a matter of moments, and everything else behind the curtain. So if you're not a premium subscriber, you get a chance to check it all out. Or if you already are, and thank you for that, we'll send you a free Rotogrinders t-shirt. So without further ado, let's wrap up week 11. My favorite play, you know, Matt's the Beast of the Week. All right, this time we're going to continue the happy hour trend here. We're going to keep those prices down. We're going to go back to the running back position. We're rolling Mike Davis of the Panthers, this week's Beast of the Week. Now, I absolutely love this spot for Mike Davis. This was the first guy I wanted to plug in the lineups for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into some of them here, but mainly the recency bias here. We haven't really seen a massive game out of Mike Davis. Now, we know the last few weeks, Christian McCaffrey been back in the lineup, been tough for him to put up numbers here. The price also is down at $4K last week, up to $6,800. I think that's actually going to scare some people away. Now, I know we were paying more for him earlier in the season when he was the guy, but sometimes it's a mental game, and early ownership projections are nowhere near what I thought they would be here on Mike Davis. So let's take advantage here, mainly because of the matchup. Detroit has been absolutely terrible against the run. In fact, nobody been worse. My Packers been pretty bad, but the Detroit Lions allow the most fantasy points to the running back position over the season, over the last 4 weeks. Any metric you want to look at, this is not a good run D. Davis and the Panthers favored here at home. I don't care who the quarterback is. Looks like it's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. I don't care if it's a backup here. This is a great spot. We're saving a ton of money on what you would pay on Christian McCaffrey. Mike Davis, easily my favorite play on the slate in this week's Feast of the Week. All right, guys, that wraps up here for week 11 in the Fantasy Bar. As always, if you have any comments, questions, feedback, hit that comment section right below the video. Don't forget, fantasy points for Mike Davis on DraftKings for your shot at some free RG Premium. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. We thank you for that. Subscribe to the channel. And you can also head over to Twitter and follow me at BeerMakersFan. For Rotogrinders.com, I am Beer saying salut. Best of luck, guys. Thank you, as always, for watching, for stopping in, hanging out at the Fantasy Bar. An early happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Good luck this week, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, thanks for checking out our videos. If you want more expert advice on DraftKings, FanDuel, or any other daily fantasy sports, make sure you check out the current videos playlist.
Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Crunch Time. It is NFL Sunday. It is obviously the best day of the week, and we're joined by a couple people to help guide us through this slate. We have one, Miss Christy Metzger. Hey, Christy.
Hey, how's it going? Looking forward to being with you guys again this Sunday.
Always a pleasure to have you. We had someone in chat before the show say, "I'm going to Miss Christy on the show. She was so great." You're not going anywhere, are you? You're still here?
No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. So.
Okay, good. Well, obviously happy to have you. Also, we got Tuttle as well. What's up, man? How are you?
You know what? I'm doing all right. Still trying to settle in on some things here. It's kind of a interesting week. I think a lot more decisions than we typically have. So that makes for, I guess, an interesting discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I really had a lot of fun building lineups this week. I thought, I'm looking at my team and I'm like, that can't lose. I feel good about where I'm at, but I'm excited to get the advice from the pros. Also, I do believe you may have some bets for us, some monkey knife fight prop bets. Is that accurate?
That is correct. If
Tuttle, why don't we start off with you?
I know for a fact I have Amari Cooper over this week. And this is what I'm trying to settle on my personal lineups. I actually kind of like this Dallas passing attack as kind of a sneakier stack. And the Cooper line you can get on Monkey Knife Fight, I believe, is like 56, 58.5. And I like the over on that. I also, for what it's worth, I didn't pick the CeeDee Lamb one. I don't know if they even have one, but I like CeeDee Lamb hit his over numbers as well. So those are the ones that I have for that. And then the other one that I have is, why not hate on Todd Gurley when you can hate on Todd Gurley? I have under Todd Gurley 53.5 rushing yards. It's a pretty clear spot where the Falcons should just throw the ball. We'll see if they do that. But even if they don't, Todd Gurley is not very good. This is a number that I think has topped about 3 or 4 times this season. So he does it about half his games. But he's not a very efficient runner. Doesn't get a lot of yardage. He gets his fantasy points via the touchdown. So I think this is a pretty tough spot for him, and I think they'll just throw the ball a lot. So I like Todd Gurley under 53.5.
Good stuff. Okay, guys, by the way, Christy, we'll get yours in a sec. If you don't have Monkey Knife Fight, now is a good time to sign up. You get 3 months of Rotogrinders Premium when you sign up. So go ahead and do that and lock in those picks and also Christy's.
Yeah, you know what? I actually didn't get mine in, but I'm the same way. I'm really high on the Dallas passing game too. And Amari Cooper definitely stood out for me too. But yeah, I look forward to talking about that a little bit further because I think that's a really good game to target today.
Okay, well, before we get into the slate, quick little hit on the weather. It's pouring in Cleveland. I mean, it's raining in Cleveland now. It will rain at the start of the game. It will rain at the end of the game. It's going to rain the whole game in Cleveland. And the weather there has been phenomenally terrible, and I've really been enjoying it. I do think because it's going to be so wet, ahead of the game and during the game, they're going into it planning on running the ball. It's just handoffs all day long. I think it's going to slow down the game. I love the under in this game, and I love the running backs in the defense because it's not that you can't pass in the rain, but it certainly makes it a little trickier. So I think the game plan will be for a whole lot of running. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I think the only thing that would potentially take me off, so I liked Miles Sanders quite a bit initially in this game, and it's kind of one of those things where you have to try to balance the potentially increase in run plays offset by probably a lower number of plays in general for this game. It doesn't have the shootout potential. The overall number of plays projects to be lower in a situation like this too. So it's something that's really tough to weigh, I think.
Interesting. Christy?
Yeah, I actually like the running game quite a bit. I know Nick Chubb, I've been kind of watching his ownership a little bit this week, and it seems like he's going to be pretty low owned once again. So I have some interest. Don't have any interest in the passing game, of course, but definitely some interest in the Cleveland running game.
Excellent. We are all in agreement there. Let's go ahead and break down the slate. We'll start with quarterback. And Christy, why don't you walk us through what you're liking there?
Yeah, so for quarterback this week, I think there's a few different ways you can go. I'll start with FanDuel first because we have a unique situation, of course, with Taysom Hill being tight end eligible on FanDuel and a cheap quarterback play on DraftKings. But for FanDuel to start with, I think Lamar Jackson makes a very good play. He hasn't done, lived up to expectations this year, but I think he's starting to maybe turn it around. The last few games he's had, 55 yards rushing. So his rushing ability in there certainly gives it a little bit more upside. He's got a good matchup. We've seen the total in this game go up this week. So I like him quite a bit. And then some other plays, on the cash game horizon, I think Deshaun Watson makes a fine play. Justin Herbert, I think is a good play. He's really been getting it done week in, week out. I think you could even, include Cam Newton in there because of the matchup this week as well. And then a couple other guys I'm looking at too. I really like Matt Ryan this week. I think you could use him for cash. He's always low owned, so I think he makes a phenomenal tournament play. And of course, Ben Roethlisberger has, been airing it out. He's got 3 wonderful wide receivers there that he's been utilizing. So I think that Ben makes a very good play too. And then going over to the DK side, I think Taysom Hill at his price, obviously a very good play. Joe Burrow, I think, is a good play too, based on his price.
You would play Hill on DK as quarterback. Like, you think that he has the potential to get it done as a quarterback, not just FanDuel where you plug him in a tight end.
I do. And I would say that's more of a tournament play. I'm looking at some other guys on the cash side, but for tournament, absolutely.
Interesting. All right. Tuttle, tournament wise, what are you liking?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what Christy said, and then from there, it's just teams that you prefer in terms of like double stacking and stuff, which is one of the reasons why I like Andy Dalton. His pieces are cheap on both sites. Cooper and Lamb, like I said, are my 2 favorite pieces, but Michael Gallup's also really, really cheap on DraftKings, so I think he'll get some ownership there. The other one cheap quarterback option, PJ Walker, same exact price as Taysom Hill on DraftKings. He's the cheapest, I think, actual quarterback playing on FanDuel. He was good in the XFL, obviously big, huge leap in terms of playing up in competition. But I actually trust that Panthers coaching staff and offensive coordinator in terms of actually putting him in situations to exceed. So I think PJ Walker is a pretty solid play as well. Stack him with his old teammate, Robbie Anderson, if you want to. Otherwise, you can go with DJ Moore as well in that one. Otherwise, in cash games, it's a lot of what Christy said, so I won't get too in depth there. But yeah, in terms of like the lower owned, cheaper guys that I like Dalton and PJ Walker.
Interesting stuff. All right, let's go to running back. And Tuttle, you can take kind of the chalkier plays here. What do you like?
Yeah, so the chalkier plays here. The chalkiest is obviously going to be Dalvin Cook. A really,
so
really good spot for him. He's really good. And here's the thing with him, and I mentioned it. I sent a tweet during Monday Night Football when they were playing the Bears. Like I actually faded Dalvin Cook in all my lineups, and it was the right move. He's frightening to fade because he's going to get 30 touches, and it's in a good spot. They want to run the ball. They want to give him the ball at the goal line. Like, theoretically, yes, at this ownership, he's more than a fine fade in tournaments at this ownership, at this price tag, but it is scary. His ceiling is just ridiculous, and we saw that ceiling, prior to last week, the 2 weeks before that, just put up monster games. So I do think this is something pretty clearly you just eat this chalk in cash games and then kind of move on. From there, it gets a little bit more interesting because then I think you're basically stuck between some lower priced running backs. There's no really other high priced running backs that stand out. I think Alvin Kamara is a little too expensive for the situation he's in. Same can be said for Aaron Jones. So then you kind of start getting, like I said, a little bit lower priced running back. So you look like at a Calen Blage, who we actually have projected as the second highest owned running back on DraftKings. But basically with all these guys in this lower range, I think ownership's going to be spread out quite a bit. My personal rankings, you can see here, I have up on the screen what we have for projected ownership for DraftKings. My personal rankings of these guys in the mid tier or that 5K range, I would prefer Antonio Gibson over Blage and over Duke Johnson. But I do agree these guys are going to be kind of the heaviest owned guys in that range. And I also think Giovanni Bernard will get some ownership in that price range as well. I think he's a fine overall play. And then if you want to go really, real cheap, Adrian Peterson's your guy. He's only 4K on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. He's a guy that you're kind of like, hey, I don't want to play this guy. But he's also somebody that probably a touchdown in like 50, 60, 70, 80 yards is enough to, be good on this slate. So he's definitely viable, I think, in all formats, even though it feels a little ugly playing him.
Okay. Christy, what do you like here in tournaments?
Yeah, I agree. Dalvin Cook is going to be the extreme chalk, and there's going to be a lot of builds that, you land on like a Gio Bernard or Blage or Duke Johnson or things like that. But what I like this week is a couple of guys that I'm focused on. I like Derrick Henry. I don't know how popular he'll be. I don't think very popular. But if they can keep that game close, I mean, we can easily see Derrick Henry have, a smash spot here. His price is right, especially on FanDuel. I think he's $8,200 or $8,700. So you're getting a running back that's getting all the touches, which is exactly what you want. So I like him a lot. On DraftKings, I think Zeke actually makes an interesting play. I like that game a lot. He was a top 3 back drafted at the beginning of the season. And I know based on quarterback play, it just, things have gone downhill for him and injuries and things like that. I certainly love the passing game too, but I think he makes an interesting play. And then another back that I really like this week is Mike Davis. I think he's finally in a good matchup. He's set up for some good success. We saw him have a lot of success earlier with McCaffrey out this year. So he's someone that I thought would maybe be a little bit more popular and someone that I'm definitely overweight on the field.
Okay, that makes me feel good. I have Zeke and Derrick Henry in my main lineup, so I feel good about that. But I also have some dude named Ahmed. Is that just you can't play it? He's just a cheap running back who I thought would get the touches. Is that a no-go?
I certainly think you could play him. He kind of falls in that lower tier where, there's a bunch of those that we kind of talked about. So, I think he's okay. He's, I maybe focus more on Blage and Duke Johnson and Gio Bernard, in the lower tier.
Okay, excellent stuff. Let's talk about wide receiver. Christy, you can go first here. What is our chalky goodness?
Yeah, I think on the chalk side, I think Terry McLaurin is going to be pretty chalky for a receiver this week. He's been getting it done week in, week out. I also think Justin Jefferson makes a very good play. And then you've got some Steeler plays that are kind of in that mid-tier too, like Deontay Johnson, I think makes a really good cash game play. Juju. And I know like on FanDuel, all the Pittsburgh Steelers are priced kind of in the same range there. So I think like Claypool will make a good certainly make a good GPP play, but I like Deontay Johnson quite a bit. Jacoby Myers, especially on DraftKings, is going to be very highly owned this week. He's $4,900. He's been playing very, very well and kind of the number 1 receiver in the Patriots offense. I think he's a good play on FanDuel as well. I also think Brandon Cooks is a good play too. He's kind of, if you're looking to get someone a little bit cheaper to get in some of the higher price backs and such. It'll be interesting to see the ownership too on Devontae Adams. He's obviously a great play, but he's gotten very expensive. A little bit tougher matchup with Indy, but matchups really don't matter for him. So I think, I'm leaning more on him on a GPP play. And then I'd also mention, Julio Jones and Ridley. I think Julio, you could say he's cash game playable as well, but those are kind of some guys I'm looking at in the tournament area. And then just a couple other quick ones. I think Mims on DK is very cheap, and so is Michael Gallup. He's $3,700. So I think those are some really good tournament plays in there.
Okay, great stuff. Tuttle, what do you have at wide receiver? And kind of run through it, but I'm especially interested in some of those cheaper tournament options.
Yeah, Christy nailed a lot of it. So I'll try to do more of the cheaper guys on FanDuel specifically. She mentioned like Gallup and stuff, and Mims are playable on DraftKings where they're under 4K there. On FanDuel, if you're looking kind of in that 5K range, CeeDee Lamb, I already mentioned him a couple times. He's $5,800. Marquise Brown's $5,900. A guy that I don't like, but I keep kind of ending up, and I don't think he's like a terrible option. Marvin Hall at $5,100. Detroit's going to be short Galladay. They're short DeAndre Swift, obviously. So they're running with a lot of their backup players. Hall's actually been somewhat serviceable, but he's only $5,100. He is, I think, the lowest I would go. Somebody I liked earlier in the week, I kind of soured because of the weather here, is Jalen Reagor. If you think Philadelphia will throw the ball at all, I think Reagor makes for an okay option. Curtis Samuel's another potentially cheap wide receiver option, cash games tournaments. I think he is kind of fringe cash game option. He's actually been seeing some rushing opportunities with Christian McCaffrey sidelined. We'll see if he continues to get those today as well. And then I also like, again, Christy mentioned Mims on DraftKings. Brashard Perryman had a really good game prior to their bye. Couple touchdowns, 100 yards or so. I think he's in play in tournaments as well. I would largely play him at stacks of that game, but I do think he's a fine tournament option.
Okay, let's go to tight end. Tuttle?
So I'm not sure if you guys have heard, but Taysom Hill has tight end eligibility.
Oh, my goodness.
So yeah, play him on FanDuel. DraftKings is where the discussion is, I guess, a little bit, but not much more interesting. Just because Mark Andrews is pretty clearly the play there as well. So I think in terms of like cash game construction, is a pretty clear cut week on where we want to go. Some tournament pivots. I mentioned Detroit's gone down with Galladay's obviously still out. TJ Hawkinson I think is fine. I think Hawkinson is actually way too cheap on DraftKings, so I'm fine going him in tournaments. He was pretty consistent until last week. He was dealing with a toe injury before the game started. He played his season low snap rate last week, so assuming he's back to fairly full health, I think Hawkinson's a really good play. I like Dallas Goedert a lot before that weather. I still think he's a fine play for his price tag. And then Hayden Hurst is another guy that I kind of like that I think could go a little bit overlooked in that Atlanta-New Orleans game. I think he makes for a fine tournament target as well.
Okay. Christy, anything else there at tight end?
Boy, I think we're on the same place for tight end for sure. As far as DraftKings, Mark Andrews is just too cheap this week. And so I like him probably the best, but I agree. Hawkinson is a great play, no Galladay. He's definitely going to get some looks. Goddard too, even though in spite of the weather, I think he's a good play. Logan Thomas, if you want to go really cheap, I think he's 3,300 on DraftKings, makes a good play. And I'm in agreement too. I think Hurst could be kind of a sneaky overlooked guy. And then maybe I just throw in Hunter Henry as well as another possibility.
Okay. How about defense, Christy?
Yeah, so for defense, I'll start with FanDuel. I think it's possible to get up to the top, and the top play is clearly Pittsburgh this week. They're the best defense out there. It's a little bit easier to get to them. Underneath them, I do like the Chargers. I think they make a very good play too. They're $500 cheaper, so if you need a little bit of savings. And then some lower owned plays that I like. I do like the Bengals quite a bit this week. I think you could make an argument for Detroit as well. I think the Dolphins and Washington are always in play, but I think for me this week I'm looking to probably pay up a little bit more on FanDuel. On DraftKings, I would say Washington is a good play. Miami. And then again, if you're looking to save, Bengals are dirt cheap over there, and even the Falcons if you're really looking to save some money.
Okay, Tuttle, you got anything off the wall there? Defense?
No, not really. I think she mentioned them all. I don't know if she got Washington football team, but I think they're also in play on both sides. But yeah, pretty much in the same line of thinking as her.
Okay, great. How about stacks? Tuttle, you can lead us off here. Your favorite stack, and you can go with hey, this is the obvious stack. I'm playing a lot of it because it's good, but also give me something that other people are not playing, which I guess is the Dallas passing attack for you.
Yeah, Dallas passing attack for me. Carolina passing attack for me as well as in playing tournaments, and then some of the higher owned stacks. I like Big Ben in the Steelers. It's hard to see a situation where one or two of his wide receivers don't go off. But I will say, I got a lot of heat for this one on the Swolecast. Like the one scenario where that doesn't happen is the Steelers defense and James Conner getting this game to 21-0 lead and Conner just eating the rest of the game. So I do like Conner quite a bit in tournaments, and that was a very unpopular take earlier this week on the Swolecast. So while I like the Pittsburgh stack, and I think it tees up and everything on paper is perfect for it, including a couple of cornerbacks out for the Jaguars' already bad defense. It's a stack that I'll probably be short on just because I think it's going to be a really, really popular, especially on FanDuel because it's a cheaper stack.
Interesting. All right, Christy, your favorite stacks?
Yeah, so I like the Atlanta-New Orleans game quite a bit. I mentioned, I liked Matt Ryan. I think he always goes a little bit under-owned, so I like that. And then I like the Minnesota-Dallas game quite a bit. I like a lot of those Dallas receivers. Having Andy Dalton back is kind of a big deal. And so, and obviously with Dalvin Cook and even Justin Jefferson and some of those guys, I really like that game. And then I do have some interest too in the Houston New England game as well.
Okay. How about who's your guy? Who are you most overweight on? Who's your 100%er or the guy you like the most this week? Christy, you got a guy this week? Yeah,
well, aside from Taysom Hill, of course, on FanDuel, it's hard not to. I have a lot of Dalvin Cook this week. He's probably my favorite play by far.
Okay. Tuttle, you got a guy? Can be cheap, expensive. I don't care.
Let's go off the board. Let's go with let's make it CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb. Okay. Good stuff.
I like that.
Let's see. We've got 7-8 minutes left. We can open it up to some questions. So I'm going to jump here. We've got our Discord going for our premium members. Also have the YouTube chat up. So really quickly, let's dive into some of these. Okay. D. Kinder says Adams and Logan Thomas or McLaurin and Andrews in DK Cash. Christy?
I would say McLaurin and Andrews.
Okay. Dallas Till says Justin Jefferson or Deontay Johnson DK Cash. Tuttle?
Yeah, that's close. I think chalk will be Justin Jefferson. I will say his production is a little bit more volatile. So I do slightly side with him, but I there's a case for Deontay for sure too.
Okay. Jake says Blage and Mims or Peterson and Brandon Cooks in DK Cash.
Yeah, that's the other question. This is Christy though, right? My bad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. What was the first one again?
It was Blage and Mims versus Peterson and Brandon Cooks.
I would say Peterson and Cooks.
Okay. Looking down a little bit. Sean says DK Cash, Mims and Juju or AP and Jefferson.
I'll go AP and Jefferson.
David Lynch says, any love for Alex Smith this week? Christy, that's a good question.
That is a good question. I can see, in a large field GPP, but he's not someone that I have in my player pool really this week.
Okay. Keith says, FanDuel Cash, Connor or Davis, and play one of the defenses in the Cleveland Philly game with that rain? ?
Connor or Davis or Connor and is this more like a statement?
I'm not exactly sure. There was a question mark at the end of it, but it sure seems like a statement. Do you have any interest?
It's fine with me.
Do you have any interest in the defenses there in that rain game? What you got, Philly or Cleveland, I guess?
Yeah, I prefer the Philly side, but I think either's fine.
Okay. Matt Robertson says James Conner or Mike Davis. There you go. That's the question. Conner or Mike Davis, and also Marvin Jones or Deontay Johnson. Christy.
Okay, I like Mike Davis a lot, so I'm definitely overweight on him. I would say him. And you said Deontay Johnson or
Marvin Jones.
Or Marvin Jones. That's a tough one too. I think I would side with Deontay Johnson, but I actually like both of them, and I want to make sure to get a little bit of each into some of my lineups.
Okay, we'll go to JRC, FanDuel Cash, Lamar and Mears, or Watson and Jefferson.
Lamar and who?
Meirs. That's got to be a typo, right? I have no idea who that is, or maybe it's a dude I just don't know. Myers?
Yeah,
it
should be Myers.
Myers. Autocorrect.
Okay, Lamar and Myers or what?
Watson and Jefferson.
Lamar and Myers.
Okay. CD says, in a FanDuel GPP, can I go Aaron Rodgers, or would it be better to spend down and lock in Cook?
Yeah, I Cook. Obviously, he's my. I would if you have to sacrifice Cook, I would definitely get Cook in there instead.
Okay. Fit Crooks, DK Cash, Blage and Lions D, or Duke and the Washington football team D?
Duke.
Right. Alex says, do I have to bring back a Falcon stack? Parentheses, please say no. Christy, any thoughts there?
Do you have to bring it back? Is that what he's saying?
Yep.
I'd prefer to, but I could see there's possibly ways where you might not get to that point. So I'm okay with that, but normally I'd like to bring it back.
Okay, we'll go to Jeremy Prino. He says, DK single entry GPP Tuttle. You want Justin Jefferson, or are you hooked on a Thielen?
I think Thielen's the better tournament play for sure.
All right. Adam says DK Cash, Myers or CD. I know, Tuttle, you like CD, but Christy, Myers or CD for you?
I'd say Myers for cash, CD for tournaments.
Great. Jared says, any Naheem Hines love? Naheem Hines love.
So remember, Ian Rappaport is not very good at his job, and he's the one that started the speculation that Nyheim Hines is going to get more carries. It's all speculation. It's just a hot hand approach. I mean, he's fine in tournaments, and you're just hoping that he gets the hot hand and he gets all the carries. But I don't think there was anything to the report earlier that he's going to be the lead guy.
Okay, got a couple minutes left. Let's keep knocking out these questions. We'll go to Dat Perp. It says 2v2 on DK, AP and Adams, or Mike Davis and Deontay Johnson.
Oh, that's actually a good one. The first one was Adams and
AP.
An AP. Okay. I'd actually go the second one, I think.
Okay. DJ says, does anyone think that Hill just plays the first few snaps and struggles early and then Winston takes over? I think Winston takes over by halftime. Does anyone else? Is that a crazy take?
It's not crazy, and that's why I don't think you necessarily have to play him on DraftKings. Opportunity cost at the quarterback position is a lot higher than the tight end position.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Okay. Preston says DK Cash, Cooper or Duke?
I would say Duke for Cash.
Generic says, do I have to play Cook in FanDuel Cash?
Yes.
Kind of, yeah. You kind of got to do it. He's that dude. Donnie says, in a Pittsburgh stack, last piece in single entry, would you rather have Cooks or CD for the ownership discount?
Ooh, Cooks or CD for the ownership. I think CD does have a lot of upside. Probably go CD.
Okay, excellent. Actually, have done pretty well. Towards the end of this, all the questions really start fading away as people have everything locked in and they're ready to watch some football. If you have any last minute questions, now is your chance. We've got literally less than a minute to get it done. Well. All right, 508 Nate says DK Cash, Andrews. Oh, this is a Sunday, Monday slate. I guess we'll do it. Andrews Jefferson, Kelsey Mims, or Amari Waller?
Jeez, yeah, that's tough. Andrews, Jefferson, Amari, Andrews, Mims, or Waller, what?
It's too late, you know.
Andrews side, I don't know.
All right.
Off guard with the adding Monday night.
Yeah, that threw me for a loop too. Generic says, I love Zeke. Anyone with me? I am with you. I love Christy is with you as well. Yeah, I think I am high on Zeke and on Derrick Henry this week. They're my dudes, so we shall see. Okay, we have done it. We have made it up to the lock. A few people saying thank you. You're very welcome. And I say thank you to you for viewing. If you enjoy this show, you should sign up for Rotogrinders Premium. You get a deal if you do it. We're giving you $5 off your first month, and you get great content from not just these pros, but literally a whole host of really sharp minds. So go ahead, sign up, be a member of the Rotogrinders community. That Core 4 package is as good as it gets and the best deal in the biz. For Christy, for Tuttle, for Devin, always working hard behind the scenes. Guys, we appreciate you. We love it. And we will catch you next week. You have been crunched.